whoever's watching the the Q&A questions channel, keep an eye out for Edge of the Woods spoilers, since the book did already release at like hours ago for some people.
Yeah, the people in the Australian market already have it, and probably other people in similar parts of the world. So definitely keep your eyes open for those spoilers and be careful with those. If mods could clear any of the spoilers out of there, that would be great.
We will definitely keep an eye out for that. Do you guys want to go ahead and get started, or do we want to wait for a few more people?
Let's wait the 5 minutes until the scheduled starting time. I don't want to people to feel left out if we start a few minutes early. I guess we can do some general discussion before that, but let's wait until we hit 6:30 even for the questions.
Sounds good.
Why don't we use this 5 minutes for Kester, Elfie, and Krita to ask me any questions you guys want to ask me? How about that? Or you guys can talk about your experiences with the book or whatever general stuff you want to talk about. I'm putting you guys on the spot. That's fine. Okay.
Tell you what, is the stage currently open? Like, can the audience hear at the moment?
The stage is open. The audience can hear, and I've already started the recording, but we can like edit this part out or keep it in, depending on how funny it is. So,
all right.
The only question I have is, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm hydrating, so people don't have to ask about that. I will be hydrating a lot. My throat has been a little scratchy. I don't think I'm sick or anything, but I think I'm just dealing with some sinus allergies. So I'll be hydrating a lot, and so there will be some hydration breaks for me during this session, I think, which I guess is pretty usual for me. But no, aside from maybe dealing with some sinus allergies, I am doing just fine. How are you?
Peachy. All right.
Wonderful.
How are things going? How are you dealing with the thing that happened over in Progression Fantasy with the Amazon's new toggle that's like costing people sales?
I should look at my KDP numbers on that. I don't think that I've been hugely affected. I have not gone to the dashboard yet to actually update all my. Don't want to have to like re-upload all of them until I have gone through and done another verification pass on all of my manuscripts to make sure that I'm uploading the right one. I'm on a new computer, but I just got, I don't know, like a few weeks ago, and I don't want to overwrite my books with the wrong versions or something like that. So I'll play with it in a few days or something and make sure I go through all those new prompts. But thus far, let me take a look at KDP.
For people unaware, Amazon has a new toggle on the book releases that indicates that no AI was used to write portions of the book. And if that is not toggled, they do something with the book where it doesn't show up on searches.
I don't actually know if that's true. I've heard that rumor around. I'm not really seeing any noticeable difference in my sales. Like they're lower than they were a couple weeks ago, but that's unless they triggered it like the 1st of September or something. I don't see any significant change, and I would expect a dip going into a month where there's going to be new book releases and things like that, and then hopefully we'll see a spike in sales for my books today, tomorrow, when Edge of the Woods comes out. So I don't know. I'm not seeing anything that looks hugely suspicious to me. But
there have been other authors that have said that they've noticed a fairly sizable dip in sales numbers since it happened. But the biggest issue is that the toggle's sort of retroactive on all novels. You'd think that they would have some sort of
default
system set up where that toggle would only need to be applied to books written in the last 5 years or something.
Yeah, no, I agree that would be more organic. I've heard some conspiracy theories that they actually want people to re-upload their books specifically because they're using a new file format with a different style of DRM so that people can't pirate the books as easily, and that the AI flag is not the reason that they want everyone to go in and update their manuscripts. Again, I have no idea what the authenticity of any of that is. That's just a story that I've heard in other authors' circles.
Well, hopefully everything gets resolved and nobody loses out on sales because of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I really do hope that it's not hurting anyone's sales, and I will go and take your advice and update all of my books at some point. Okay, well, we are at 6:30 now officially, so welcome everyone to my opening Q&A for Edge of the Woods. This is my first book in a new series called The Lost Edge. Here we've got our moderators. We've got Castor, Alfie, and Krita, and on the stage, and Duke Tersail as well. I don't know if Duke is also helping host this event. I'll let the actual moderators talk, and you guys can give your intro now.
All right. Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and woods folk, and welcome to the Q&A event for Edge of the Woods. I'm Elfie, and I'm one of the moderators here on Climbers Court. Now, before we begin, I just want to go over a few logistics. First, please note that this session is being recorded for those who are unable to make it tonight, and there will also be a transcription later in the year. And second, we have 2 channels set up to make this event go as smoothly as possible. If you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A questions channel. General chat and discussion should stay in the live Q&A chat channel. And I'll pass the mic to Castor.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is excited for the release. And I know I am. This is a. I think this is a very fun book. I had a lot of fun with it, so I hope everyone else does. Just as a heads up, the book did release in some markets already. So any Q&A questions that get posted should avoid asking questions directly about Edge of the Woods, just so that there aren't any spoilers for everyone else that's still waiting. And with that, we can just go ahead and jump in to the pre-submitted questions here. Where is the beginning? There's the beginning. So starting out from Dr. Timemore. Andrew, what is your favorite magic sword?
I have to answer Dawn. I mean, Dawn would murder me if I didn't. So I think Dawn is the only possible correct answer here.
From non-specific, why did you feel the need to create sword essence for Leon when blade sorcery / the gifts of Endaren already exist in the world?
Really good question. So blade sorcery is designed to be what the kind of skill set I imagine would be for somebody who's a priest or a paladin of a god of swords. It's holy magic. It's manifesting spiritual power in the form of a sword. It is not a swordsman's skill set in the way that sword essence is. Sword essence is closer to what you would find in cultivation style fiction for somebody who is pursuing the Tao of the sword or that sort of thing, or just general supernatural swordsmanship abilities that you'd see in cultivation books or in shonen battle manga or that sort of thing. It is a way of using your own internal abilities to manifest sword or sword-like characteristics. And so the skill set of somebody who is practicing sword essence is fundamentally very different from a blade sorcerer. A blade sorcerer like somebody like Kestrel Makar or Keldon Andis, you're going to see them conjuring like gigantic glowing magic swords. Some of them might be floating swords that they like throw around or that sort of thing. Whereas someone who is a practitioner of using sword essence is instead drawing on their own abilities in order to use certain aspects of what makes a sword in their combat style to do things like take a sword or a non-sword weapon even and cut through something that would not be able to be cut by a normal swing. So you might see somebody use sword essence to cut straight through a stone wall or something along those lines by enhancing the cutting aspect of the sword or the weapon that they're using. Or they might be drawing on things that are outside of just cutting ability and using something like the deflection aspect in order to parry an attack using a single hand or a finger. That's the type of stuff that you can do with something like Sword Essence, and it makes it a functionally very distinct skill set, and the component parts of it from a underlying magic system standpoint are also very different. I'll get into the meat of that more in the story itself, but that's kind of the high-level answer there.
All right. From Crimp, how many books do you think are going to be in the Lost Edge series?
That's totally dependent on how successful it is, just to be completely honest with you. This could end up being my super long-running forever series, if that is something that people want. It is also possible that I will wrap this up in 2 or 3 books and just stop with this essentially one arc of the story if this doesn't end up being what readers are particularly interested in. I would love to do a lot of books for this. I love this continent, this setting, and the characters that I introduced here, but from a practical standpoint, I only have so many hours in the day to write, and I want to be writing things that readers are interested in.
All right. From Tavid, do Destiny marks require that you be capable of eventually being able to achieve the capacities they give you on your own?
Really, really good question. Unfortunately, this one is going to be in read and find out territory because the underlying mechanics of how exactly Destiny marks work, that's something that the characters in the story really need to explore, and what their limitations are is pretty important to the story as well.
From Elsecaller, have you played Trails into Reverie, and what did you think of it, if so?
Not yet. I'm on Trails of Cold Steel 3 right now, so depending on whether or not I jump around after I finish the Cold Steel series or not, I'm probably 2-3 games out from playing Reverie.
From Dia, how much has your experience with LARP combat and TTRPG combat informed your writing for action scenes?
A lot, actually. So I'm not going to say it's in any way analogous to real combat, but there are certain logistics things that you learn when participating in any kind of simulated combat that I do think are applicable to writing fight scenes. For example, situational awareness is really important, and the number of people that you can reasonably keep track of with ordinary human abilities. And so even if you assume that your protagonist, for example, is faster or stronger or more resilient than the average human being to whatever extent, there are certain logistical limits to how many people that you can effectively fight at any given time, unless you're getting into things like, the Flash level speedster territory, or using things that are designed for combating multiple people at once. So area of effect spells and abilities, things like that. Which means that from participating in these games, I've learned about tricks for how you manage those types of situations. And it's the type of thing that you might get through other books or other types of education as well. But learning how to, fight in a doorway so you don't get surrounded by people, or use terrain to your advantage, or that sort of thing. And then also just getting a general idea of how much a skill difference or a speed difference really matters, and figuring out kind of what ratios are reasonable. So when you read a lot of cultivation novels or shonen battle manga or things like that, you'll occasionally see things like someone fighting somebody who has a power level that's 100 times higher, and that means that their core stats are 100 times higher, or something like that, meaning that their speed or strength or whatever are 100 times higher. You can't really reasonably fight somebody like that. That breaks my suspension of disbelief, personally. Every author and every reader is going to draw their line somewhere else. But I would say that my LARP experience has informed giving me a specific perspective on saying, I don't really want somebody to be able to effectively fight against somebody 1v1 or even 1v small group or something like that when you have a speed difference of more than maybe 2, 3, 4 to 1. And so you really need to have either tactics or large groups or things like that to even the odds if you're fighting somebody who's 4 times faster than you or that sort of thing. Yeah, so those types of logistics considerations, I would say, are really important. And then aside from that, another part of it is that people are not always going to use their abilities most optimally or remember exactly what the right spell or skill is in any given circumstance. And you have to fudge things for a book to some degree so that the person doesn't feel like they're forgetting something that's super obvious. But what is super obvious to a reader from a reader's perspective in a desperate situation may not always be immediate to a character who is in a scene when that scene is happening. So I sometimes deliberately make people have suboptimal moves. You'll see that in all of my books, where even somebody who's an expert in their field might actually make a mistake in the middle of combat, or forget that they have a specific item or ability or resource in a way that is deliberate and called out, as opposed to just being the author forgot this character had this ability, or what we call idiot ball holding. I'm not writing these things just from a narrative has to advance in a specific fashion, and therefore the character has to behave out of character. To me, my characters are human or human-like in terms of their abilities, and that means that even an expert in their field will sometimes have an off day or an off moment and not make the most effective move in any given circumstance.
Yeah, for
Long
the
answer.
what was that? Sorry.
Long answer there. I'm going to drink water. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I was just to back you up, like in the LARP, like I didn't play too many characters with a wide range of abilities other than Jace. And, end game of the LARP, I had 30, 40 spells that I could probably do. I wouldn't use more than like 7 core abilities mid combat. I would have to like back out and like flip through a spell book to try to remember what I could do.
100%. Same was true when I was playing Sal in the games. And I saw the exact same types of things happen with all of the heavy spellcasters. Your Tabithas, your Therians, when they've got 30, 40, 50 spells, like they're very, very smart people, and they are playing characters that are extremely competent in their fields, but there's absolutely no way to know what the optimal thing is to use in any given situation when you have a skill set that's that large.
All right. From Krita, of the characters introduced in Edge of the Woods, who is your favorite?
I can't pick favorites among my children, but I would say that one of the most fun characters to write of my new cast is the Smiling Sword Saint. And I think that people are going to be divided on the Smiling Sword Saint, but you're either going to love or you're going to hate the Smiling Sword Saint. I don't think there's going to be a lot of in between on that.
I am glad that is your answer. I had a fear that it was going to be a different answer.
You thought I was going to say Lance Rival.
Yeah. All right. From Elscholar, will we get to see or hear about class mark mechanics and abilities in Edge of the Woods specifically, or in a later book in the series? That's Raffo. From a previous question. It's going to be in this book. It's going to get things like that are going to be addressed.
Yep, you will see some basics here, but they'll be expanded on more in the future.
All right. Also from Elscholar, how much do the Edge of the Woods Fae have in common with standard Fae in most stories?
A lot. Okay. I use Fae in this story, and this is explained in the story. Fae is used as an umbrella term by humans to describe a very broad category of creatures. Those creatures encompass things that we in the real world would call fairies, as well as other entities that are from other mythological backgrounds, like, say, kami. So basically, any sort of nature spirit entities, humans will call fae or yokai or things like that, without a real understanding of the fact that there are different subcultures and subspecies and things like that among them. Within those subcultures and things like that, you will have things that are closely resembling classical fairy traditions. You will also have things that are outside of those, like kami, as I mentioned. So you'll see kodama, for example. A kodama is not necessarily going to have the same rules and vulnerabilities and things like that as a classic courtly fae, and your classic courtly fae or wild fae or whatever will generally abide by certain classical fairy traditions, vulnerabilities to iron, the rules of three, no lying, that sort of stuff. You'll see those things in this story for specific types of fairy culture things. It is not always going to be clear how much of that is true and how much of that is human legend and how much of that is fairy propaganda. And also how much of it may be applicable to different courts of fae. Different courts of fae are not identical. So you will see you'll see a lot of classical fairy elements, or have them alluded to, like Underhill, for example, will be alluded to. But I am using a broad human term for fae, and as a result of that, everything isn't going to line up exactly with what you might expect because it is a human understanding of a non-human concept. Hope that makes sense.
All right. From Orthus, which one of my characters would you be most terrified of getting a hold of anathema?
Oh, Jace, absolutely.
Really?
No question. No, I mean, Caster with anathema would be like finding a way to take anathema to just like infinitely farm resources and money. Jace is going to be playing with anathema and being like, I know exactly how anathema works. Here's how I break the universe.
Okay, see, I thought you would have immediately gone for the evil character that I played.
Oh, well, yeah. So I was thinking specifically in terms of the ones that this community is familiar with. You have a number of antagonists that would be terrifying. For example, your Cobalt Nightmares character that was the original inspiration for Corin Cadence's brother. That would be an absolutely horrifying character to have their hands on anathema. But I was thinking mostly in terms of the ones that this community is familiar with.
That's fair. The one that I was thinking of was the servant of the Star Eater.
Oh yeah, that'd end badly for everyone. But spoilers for people who might end up having to read Shades of Ruin at some point in the future, and now they know that there may be a traitor among the group.
Well, they didn't know until you said that.
Oh yeah, no, that was 100% deliberate. I'm giving people some heads up that there might be a traitor among the group, and it might be Jace's character.
All right. From Sterling, what plants form the basis of Dania's food and agriculture, and are they plants native to Dania?
Some of them are, some of them aren't. I get into a little bit of ecology in this book, but not a lot. A lot of it's fantasy plants. I'm just going to be honest. There isn't a great answer to this without getting into a deep fantasy ecology. But You'll have your standards like wheat and rice and things like that, but there's a lot of fantasy plant stuff. We do get into some growing food stuffs and things like that in the story, so I don't want to talk about that too much right now.
From Mountain King, what essence do you want at your heart point?
I mean, come on, guys. I'm an optimizer. I'm going to go for some sort of like min-max or broken, ridiculous thing. So I would say that in terms of things that are conceptually suited to me and also like ridiculous min-max or options, I would say something like story essence or narrative essence. And then outside of that, in terms of the more common types, I would probably go for one of your emulation ones. So something like Destiny or Dreams or Spirit or something like that that's hyper flexible and has a really solid foundation to support a whole bunch of other nonsense skill set ones, like picking up Wishing Essence or something like that.
From Orthus, which essence would allow a woodchuck to chuck wood if it had it in its heart point?
Wood Essence. Come on. Easy one, guys.
From Elsecaller, were there any specific or unique essences the Ashen Lord was known for using?
Yeah, definitely. Although there's a lot of Ashen Lord propaganda out there, so you never know what's really true. But the most famous thing the Ashen Lord is famous for is the Ashen Scouring, which is a effect that spread from a part of the continent across a large portion of the continent that is sort of your classic JRPG miasma effect in some respects. There's more going on with it than that, but if you've played a classic JRPG where there's some sort of miasma that turns ordinary animals into monsters, it's basically that, but with a lot going on the back end that makes it more complicated than that. But that is what the Ashen Lord is most famous for. A type of essence that the composition of is not widely known that was used during the war with the Ashen Lord to spread a miasma across a large portion of the continent that changed plants and animals and things like that into other forms of life and also altered the terrain and all sorts of other fun stuff. So that is what he is most famous for.
Also from Elsecaller, will we see any of the bloodline marks and their essences in Edge of the Woods?
Sort of. That's kind of a read and find out thing. I will say that there are characters in the story that do have bloodline powers. You're not going to get a ton of detail on that in this one, but I'll read and find out the detail on that.
From Kaizen, will we see Attuned in Edge of the Woods?
Not on screen, but they will be referenced.
From Sterling, how well maintained and cared for are the woods in Edge of the Woods, and what type of forest is it?
It's a complicated question because there are actually several different segments of a forest, and they have different levels of maintenance and different styles. In terms of the general environmental style, I would say temperate broadleaf. That is the general style of the forest, but with the caveat that there are a lot of different sections, and it is not directly analogous to any real-world forest. You've got a lot of crazy magical stuff going on. If you look at the map, for example, you'll see a lot of trees, as well as things like mountains in formations that would never make sense in the real world, and that's because magic was used to form the area.
From Tobias, could you give us a rough estimate in where each stage would be in comparison to an attunement? For example, would a candle be more in the standard quartz carnelian range, or sunstone, or could a candle solo Mizuchi?
That's a candle definitely could not solo Mizuchi. So a candle is roughly analogous to a quartz. It gets more complicated after that point. I would actually say that it takes roughly 2 levels in the Dania native essence sorcery system to translate to one attunement level. It's kind of a 2-to-1. It's much more complicated than that in reality, but like in terms of things like base stats, an attunement level is more significant than going up one level in the Dania native system. And there are more levels in the Dania native system, so it's a more of an incremental progress system.
From Elsecolor, can you get multiple destiny marks? This is because the post in your blog that was a copy paste from something says that you can, but I have been saying that I don't know anyone that does that. So
Well, you're buying into all of the modern Danian propaganda.
That's right.
But no. The meta answer is that yes, it is still technically possible to get more than one destiny mark, but virtually nobody does at this point in time. It was more common in the Smiling Sword Saints era, but for practical reasons, it is extraordinarily difficult to do now. It is not impossible, and you will eventually get characters moving in that direction over time. I won't say any more than that.
From Tobias, can I get a plush of a certain character?
I would love to give you a plush of a certain character, or several of those characters actually, but I don't know what's being done with merch for this series in general, if at all. That's Podium. I'll talk to Podium about it. I don't know if they've got a manufacturer for plushies. That's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't know what's happening with merch in general for this one.
From Elsecolor, any estimation of when or if we'll see Jace in the books?
Tough to say. So there are two routes I could theoretically go with this if we're going to see Jace at all. If we're going to see Jace at all, it would probably be around book 4 if it is in this series, and this series goes on that long. If this series is unpopular, but I decide I want to do something else on this continent, it will be in book 1 of a different series on this continent. I strongly considered writing a multi-perspective third-person series in this setting, rather than doing a first-person single-perspective one. And so, if people aren't feeling the single-perspective thing for this and would prefer to have something that's a multi-perspective story, then I will potentially hop to that and write something that is closer in style to a War of Broken Mirrors, and then Jace would be one of the main characters of that. But if I just continue with this series, Jace will probably appear around book 4-ish.
And if neither of those work out, there's always still the possibility that he shows up someplace in Mithralis in one of the later arcs.
Yeah, he would probably be there for Shades of Ruin either way, but Shades of Ruin is still quite a ways off.
All right. From Krita, for Kester, who is Jace's least favorite character, and why does he hate them so much? And for Andrew, may I have your blessing to marry Jace's least favorite character?
Oh, of course you can, but go ahead, Jace.
My Jace's least favorite character would be Lance Rival, because he is a cartoon of a man.
He is, but he's a wonderful cartoon of a man. Fans will likely be divided on Lance Rival as well.
Honestly, it's I'm doing it for the meme at this point. It was just the introduction of the character in the tabletop where I first met them. It was just a knee-jerk reaction of this person is too much and they need to stop. And I ran with it.
Well, I for one hope that you and Lance will get along someday, but we'll see.
All right, from Elsecolor, how did you come up with the idea for the Ziphiads originally?
It's an interesting question. So the character of Anna, Anna is the Ziphiad or Zyphiad in this story, and She started out as being a character that I was writing for something else entirely called Harmony of Steel. And she was the deuteragonist for that book instead of being the deuteragonist for this book. And I originally envisioned her as being sort of like, what if Dawn had a body from a start? And where would I would go from that? And she's got kind of a mix between a Dawn and Reika personality and relationship with our protagonist in this story. And so essentially, a lot of it was built around how a character like Dawn would play out if she did not have the limitations that she did originally, and where things would go naturally from there. There's more to it than that, but I would say that was sort of the starting point.
From Sterling, when making Dania, did you mean for it to be a mix of fantasy Australia and Hyrule in Tears of the Kingdom?
That's funny. I mean, I wrote this before Tears of the Kingdom came out. The whole book was written before Tears of the Kingdom came out. Obviously, there's some overlap, but that overlap is largely because we're drawing from the same stock JRPG tropes. And with Australia's reputation aside, it is sort of the monster continent, so there is that comparison there. But really, what I was drawing from largely was classic Zelda, classic Dragon Quest in terms of the sort of Yusha and Mao style continent, where you have that classic Demon King going on in the background, and Demon King spreading demons and that sort of thing, with the classic cycle of the hero and the Demon King and all that fun stuff. And that really, I'd say, goes back to Zelda 1 and Dragon Quest 1 and that sort of thing in Japanese fiction. And that's more what I'm drawing from than anything else.
Yeah, I'd say, like, from my point of view in experiencing Dania, it feels much more the continent itself is a heavy Dragon Quest feel inspiration, with Legend of Zelda references sprinkled throughout.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that the continent feels more like Dragon Quest, and Edge of the Woods feels like the Zelda zone in the Dragon Quest story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or at least it has I think there's more references throughout the rest of the continent as well. But the Edge of the story definitely feels more of the start of a Zelda game.
Absolutely.
All right. From Mountain King, what's your favorite hybrid essence so far?
It's tough to pick a favorite. I mean, as the guy with the sword special interest, obviously sword essence is fun, but I'll give you some more interesting answers than that. So there's a character in the story, I won't say who, that has an absolutely terrifying hybrid essence that isn't what you would think of in terms of classic offensive abilities or that sort of thing. And you don't never find out who has that within the scope of this book, but it's a name essence. And name essence, just think about that in the context of Fae and true naming, and a character who has name essence, they can do a lot of very, very dangerous things with that.
From Elscholar, what process do you use for making the essence compositions of hybrids? It seems like a very subjective and complex process.
So there is inherently a degree of subjectivity to any kind of essence structure, because the names for essence types are just what humans would call things. The compounds are just, this is what humans have decided to name this specific combination of things. And it's culturally derived too. And so even for something like sword essence, the composition that I've given you for sword essence, which is hyper complicated, that is one specific type of thing that people would call sword essence. Sword essence is going to be different on a Eastern European themed continent to a Western themed European continent to a Japanese continent to a Chinese themed continent, because they all have different concepts of what is a sword. And so, for example, if you took a Western European concept of a sword, that would involve both curved swords and straight swords being within the same general core concept of what a sword is. Whereas in a Chinese themed story, a Chinese themed concept of the sword, a curved sword would potentially be a different essence type than a straight sword, because culturally those are two different types of weapons. And so absolutely there's a lot of subjectivity there. When I am going through the process of figuring out what goes into a essence type, I am figuring out what the locals would call something based on the composition that's available to them, as well as if somebody is deliberately trying to make an essence type, what they would get out of the processes that they are using in order to come up with that essence type. I hope that makes sense.
From non-specific, if you had stuck with the plan to have Karis travel to Tyrrhenia first, would he have met Dawn on that continent instead?
Nope, he would not have. There would not have been a Dawn in that story.
From Toxiferous, without any spoilers, what makes this book a possible favored entry point to your works than your other books?
Part of that is just that I think that I've grown in skill as a writer. And so I think that this is a stronger introduction to my writing style in many respects than my other books. Particularly, I think that this story is good at showcasing in some portions of it just my absolute love for complicated magic systems. Part of it is that I like the characters in this one, and I feel like I did a good job of having some diversity in the cast and that sort of thing. And then I think that I handled the progression elements in the story better than I did in something like Arcane Ascension. I feel like I've learned a lot in terms of what makes a progression fantasy story tick, and particularly in the second half of this story, I think the progression feels better for a progression fantasy reader than something like Arcane Ascension generally does.
I will say, to repeat something that has been mentioned in the Discord a few times in the last week, is this book is chock full of best boys.
It really is. There are so many best boys. It's adorable. And then beyond that, I'd say that another reason why this is a good story to start with if you're new to my work is because you don't really have to read any of the other interconnected works to understand it to the same degree. There absolutely are advantages to being familiar with the other books, and there are references to the other books, etc., but it's not interdependent in the same way that the other, the big three other established series are. I think this one stands on its own a little bit better.
From Ghost, what are your favorite cultural elements introduced in this book?
That's tricky. I like a lot of it. I love what I did with fairy culture in general, and a lot of that is just, my particular take on classic fairy stories. So it's not like I created any of this wholesale or anything, but taking that and integrating it specifically with an established setting and trying to make a hybrid of classic fairy tales and myths and legends of fairies, and integrating that as organically as possible within this established setting. A lot of fun. If I had to pick one very specific thing, there's a lot of wordplay in here, and a lot of the significance of names, rules of three, things like that. And a lot of that is hidden in the subtext of Edge's storytelling. So if you're doing a reread through this, I think you'll catch things you probably didn't catch on the first time. I do that in all my books to some degree, but I feel like this one is layered in ways that the other ones weren't, and in ways that personally I enjoyed writing.
From CCN, this is a Arcane Ascension question. How will Mara get her arm back?
So, going into too much detail on that would be a spoiler for Arcane Ascension, but I will say that that is something that will be explored very early on in the next book, and they will discuss a lot of different options for that. I am not going to leave my characters in a incapacitated state for like the entire rest of the series or anything like that. So the characters that suffered very badly at the end of Arcane Ascension 4, there will be problem solving for that pretty much immediately. That doesn't mean that there's going to be an instant fix, but they're going to be discussing a bunch of options very, very quickly.
And then to clarify a second portion of that question, it's a very, very common confusion, just because it's a later edition in the book and people forget and confuse things. Mara's attunement is fine. Mara is heart marked, not hand marked.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that.
So losing an arm definitely causes problems for a heart marked attuned, but it's not damaging to the attunement itself.
That's absolutely true.
From Crimp, if you had to remove a character from any of your series, who would you remove? Assuming that the removal of the character, there's a way to remove them and nothing changes in the story, but just that character is no longer a part of it.
I mean, my obvious instinct is to get rid of a mean person like Magnus Cadence, but Magnus is too important to the narrative to do that, so I can't really do that. I would say that in terms of characters that I actually feel like maybe I shouldn't have written, that's a lot tougher. I think that maybe it wasn't necessary to write Rupert Kent's father in the way that I did. I could have just had Mara have the beef that she did with Rupert Kent without it necessarily having to involve some creepiness on the part of Rupert Kent's father. I'm iffy on that. Childhood trauma stuff is a big theme in Arcane Ascension as a whole, and it's always difficult to know which elements of that I should and should not be including. So that my gut, without thinking about that in any kind of real depth, would be something like that. But I don't have a clear answer for you in terms of, who could I remove without it making a major narrative impact, or who do I regret writing at all?
From Orthus, how would Edge of the Woods translate in Liadrin?
If you're asking me if it would be Cerulean like the Forest of Blades, that is a reasonable translation of it. There are a few different ways you could do it, but Lian is Edge, absolutely, Edge Blade Sword, and of the woods, that's trickier. You might get a Kess in there, but Cerulean by itself is probably a reasonable translation. So I'll give you that as an off the cuff, without trying to give you any kind of me going through documents to give you anything in more detail. Yes, for the people who have been pondering that, Edge of the Woods and Forest of Blades could be the two translations of the same thing.
For me, I was going for the Cerulean would be more of a woods of the edges. So I was going for more of a Lian Ser.
Lian Ser or something like that. Sure, yeah, you absolutely could do something like that.
All right. Wandering Linguist asks, from my son, what inspired this series and continent?
Oh boy, a lot of stuff. I would say that the principal inspiration for this series and continent is what I call my green tunic boys. So Peter Pan, Link, Lone Wolf from Joe Deaver's Lone Wolf series, and then characters like Robin Hood, Aragorn, basically characters with that kind of rangery aesthetic, but also an association with elements like fairies or the wild, and exploring that also with a little bit of a hint of a supernatural skill set on the part of the protagonist. So this is sort of me writing a Link or Peter Pan-esque protagonist played straight, with setting specific elements that are distinctive from that. part of it's also that this more closely resembles a backstory that I used for one of my characters in LARP than the version that you've seen in books so far. And there are important narrative reasons why this series has this character working out differently than a version you've seen of something similar in the existing books. And I'm genuinely being like super vague on that for reasons I don't want to spoiler too much about this story or this series. People are going to figure out a lot of what I'm talking about real quick after you've read through this book.
From Krita, what kind of material did you draw the first map of Mithralis on?
The very first map of Mithralis was probably just straight up written on paper.
I think this is from a conversation a couple hours ago. I think it's talking about the map that you have framed.
Oh, interesting. So I do definitely have some like cloth maps and things like that that Rowan Noel Williams made. Those are not the originals, but the cloth maps were used in LARP, and those are very important to me. So those I'd say are like the authentic foundation for what we used for the LARP for a long period of time. And so credit to Rowan for that. I know that earlier ones were made by me or Maui or Rowan on paper at various different points in time.
From Ryoden, are you considering the magic system introduced in this series to be one you may extrapolate further in a game format for a general audience?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, Castor, you're probably going to be frustrated with this because I do already have a version of Essence Sorcery in the tabletop that I've been running for you, but it's going to change a lot as a result of the book, and it's probably going to be functionally much more similar to the book version when I'm done with it. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't continued running the tabletop.
Honestly,
I'm going to revise a lot of that.
Honestly, that works out great for me because the question that I was going to ask you next time that we were like doing a gaming thing was going to be whether I can redo Jace based on the book, because I probably don't need to waste my character points on chaos when I could just put them into fortune and use fortune to make the chaos.
Well, that'll get more complicated. So the way it's probably going to end up getting built is going to be built around buying aspects. But I should not go into too much detail before people have even read the book, but we'll definitely talk at some point about that. And then post-book, if I do another Q&A, I can talk about the tabletop more in some detail at some point with fans in general.
That's cool. There's a lot of interest in that to figure out more of what's going on with that. So, all right. From Lydia, what word order does Liadrin use? Subject, verb, object, verb, subject, object, verb.
I'm going to say it varies, and I'm going to give you the real answer, which is that I have not written out even a single actual coherent sentence in Liadrin yet. So it is possible that I will eventually develop the language, but I'm no Tolkien, and it will never be one of my major interests or things that I delve into in a lot of detail.
From Sterling, what types of foods do Ziphiads eat?
Lots of foods. They eat pretty much what people eat. So we'll go into fantasy ecology in the book itself more, but whatever normal humanoid diet would be.
From Race Nizar, will we get to see how some of the different magic systems interact with each other anytime soon? I've been wondering what advantages, disadvantages someone with more than basic ability with multiple systems would have to deal with.
Yeah, but probably not in this book. There's like a little discussion about that in this book. I actually cut a lot of the talk about it. Originally, one of the interludes had a very long talk between our narrator and the interlude protagonist about interactions between divinity and sorcery and essence sorcery. And it was beautiful, beautiful magic theory for days. And it was just way too much for some of the readers. So I cut that almost entirely, and it will probably go in book 2 or book 3. And we will also probably see some characters deliberately experimenting with that combination of things, probably in book 2 or book 3.
Unfortunate for me. I was really looking forward to that passage being in the final version so that I could stop doing my spiel about how things don't work.
You can still give people who are interested some of the answers from that segment. It's still canonically
no.
accurate.
I mean, it's still like that is how I explain it. It's just that because it hasn't been in a book that like the wide readership has read, it's only existed in me answering a specific person. It's one of the more common questions or misconceptions that people in like the question discussion channel or spoilers general on the Discord will come up with and have to be like, and I'll have to correct what they're thinking about.
That'll make sense. I'm going to take a 30-second break to go get some water. I'll be
All
back.
right.
It will actually be more than 30 seconds.
Well, Kester, I have a question for you that might entertain us in the meantime.
All right, go ahead.
Is there a particular question that you have been asked more than any other question?
Probably what Shadow Essence can do, and all of them from Kaizen. Sorry. Love you.
Calling them out there.
Or not specific, not even specifically Shadow Essence, but literally what can the Shadow Attunement do?
Yeah, every time I pop my head into the question discussion, I'm just like, oh my goodness, how does he not get overwhelmed?
That's the trick is you do get overwhelmed and then you ride the current.
The tsunami.
But no, it's honestly it's the Shadow, even not just from Kaizen. That's joking, but the Shadow Attunement itself has a lot of questions that get asked about it. That get repeated a lot just because it is one of the more versatile. Like it doesn't have a lot of the raw power that other attunements do, but the fact that it has such a broad reach in what it can stretch itself to do using Shadow and Enhancement, like even ignoring Void, just what it can get away with Shadow and Enhancement, and the fact that that many of the shadows learn how to convert their shadow into perception mana so that they can get real illusions and things like that. It's a very versatile attunement. So there's just so much ground to cover, even with just that one.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about the settings. It's like about the magic system is it seems like no matter how many books Andrew writes, it's never going to cover every single thing every attunement can do because there's always new things being developed.
Well, sort of. It's, I suppose, a big misconception is that attunements have a bunch of abilities that they can do, which isn't entirely true. It's attunements typically have one ability, but that ability is more of a broad use ability, and depending on how the specific attuned with that attunement learns to manipulate that function by shaping it or fueling it with other mana types, they can get different types of effects out of it. But it's still the same core feature that's being used rather than a bunch of different ones.
It's just how creative the user is in using it.
Yes, and that is a huge part of the magic system. Is that basically any of the magic systems, because they're all the same magic system.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one. Is it's not a bunch of different magic systems necessarily. It's all the same system, What really changes is how are you accessing that essence, and then you're using that essence to create effect techniques or spells or abilities. But anything that you can create with that essence, any other magic style could do that as well if they had that essence.
Mm-hmm.
The real difference is just the how are you getting that essence to make the technique with. And then there's the sub layer of that is, and how does that system interact with your biology when you use it? And you have stuff like essence sorcery and attunements, where there is a bit more of a direct influence because you're putting the essence in your body in different ways, versus dominion sorcery, where you're still putting the essence in your body, but it's not staying there. It's not residing in your body. It's just your body's just being used as a channel for it, and it is affecting your body in a different way than it does when you store it in a Diana's point.
That's a really good answer.
And you're back. Thank you.
Yeah, I am in fact back, so we can resume. But thank you for keeping people busy in the meantime. That was a very good answer.
Mm-hmm. All right then. From Elscolor, does the sword Aziphiad is bonded to affect them in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into that in story, but absolutely.
From Toast, at what point did you start working on this setting?
Depends on what you mean by this setting. Assuming that you're talking about Edge of the Woods specifically, I would say that it depends on whether or not you consider my work on the Harmony of Steel. Harmony of Steel was sort of my prototype for this book. And Harmony of Steel, I think I started on 2017, 2018, somewhere in that general range. That was going to be more of a classic cultivation style novel, which did not have the more Peter Pan-ish or Zelda-ish elements to it. This particular incarnation of the story, I think I started on maybe either later in 2018 or in 2019, something like that.
From non-specific, what would happen if a communication sorcerer used a ritual to contact the Dawnfire or Nightfrost?
I'm gonna read and find out that one. There's a lot going on with that. The Dawnfire and the Nightfrost will probably be relevant to the story eventually. So yeah, I'm gonna delay on that one, but not nothing is probably the answer.
From Ghost, can we expect any cameos in this book?
Yes, definitely.
What version of cameos are you talking about?
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking in terms of cameos specifically from within the setting of characters that are my characters that are not expressly identified. If what they're talking about is, is one of Tobias Begley's characters going to show up, not in this book. I don't think I have that style of cameo in here at all. They'll have to wait for AA5 for that style.
Only in the Climber's Court does that happen.
Yeah, I might do some other cameos here and there. There's some nods in the tournament in Diamantine, for example, as well. But it's mostly Climber's Court stuff.
All right. From oh, I see. That was already marked. Okay. From Sterling, is Edge secretly the son of Zoro from One Piece?
No, One Piece is phenomenal though. But no, I would say that Edge has a lot of differences from Zoro. They are not particularly similar as characters, in spite of both being sortie boys. But Zoro is a phenomenal character, and definitely encourage people to look at Zoro if they like sword characters.
From Rava, what starter Pokemon would Corrin choose?
I am not a huge Pokemon player, so I would have to look at the actual list of our 17 generations of starter Pokemon to give you a good answer to that. I can't actually give you a coherent answer.
From L Scholar, why is Edge's edginess such a read and find out topic when it has been previously brought up?
Depends on what you're referring to in terms of his edginess. So like, yeah, that's you. You're gonna have to rephrase your question for me, I think. Yeah, rephrase question, please.
From Newbie1, what is something that Edge can do with a sword that Karis cannot come close to replicating with Annihilation?
So, without too many spoilers, a good example is something that I mentioned earlier in terms of the deflection aspect. So, Karis is real good at cutting stuff, and Sword Essence also good at cutting stuff, but there are a lot of utility purposes to Sword Essence that are outside of just cut stuff good. And deflection is one of the ones that I'm willing to reveal in advance. There are others throughout the series that are specific sword aspects that are not just cut stuff good, stab stuff good. And as a result, Edge will gradually develop a skill set that is distinct from Karis's.
All right. From Toast, do you think that AI-made names for characters and locations will be more common?
I think AI-made content in general is going to gradually get more common. I think that in the absence of litigation on the subject, which there are a number of trials that are going on right now, and we'll see how those pan out. I do think that it is going to be increasingly common to see all sorts of various different forms of media utilizing AI. I have extensive thoughts on that subject, but it's outside the scope of this Q&A. But I think the clear answer is yes, people are going to be doing a lot of AI-generated content generation.
From L Scholar, Essence Sorcery seems just stronger and more versatile than other types of sorceries a lot of the time. What are some of the big downsides of it in comparison?
You're going to see a lot of the downsides within the scope of this story. But I think the idea that it is extremely powerful compared to others, it's true and it's false. They're all pretty balanced in different ways. I would say that the principal advantages of essence sorcery can be obtained through other means in ways that are in some respects easier in other continents and in other settings. I would say that the most obvious downside of essence sorcery is that it requires tremendous resources. And unless you have tremendous access to recurring resources of a specific type that you don't have competition for, you can't advance. Or at least you can't advance quickly and easily. You might be able to advance slowly, and there are methods in the book that are discussed for that. But you really need to find a good spot, or several good spots, or a method by which you can gain access to something reliably over a very long period of time without competition if you want to get strong at essence sorcery. And that is real hard. And that means that a lot of essence sorcerers are forced to travel in order to find different sources once whatever their source is runs dry, or they reach too much competition for that resource.
Yep, very much a you either are you're either paying tons of money to advance slowly, or you're gambling your life to advance
Absolutely.
slightly faster.
If even that, honestly.
I'm giving the benefit of the doubt that you're not going to gamble your life for nothing.
Questionable in the case of some characters, but yeah.
All right. From Annalyn, would an elemental's natural essence sorcery count as a first awakened point? And if so, would it lock them out of further awakening a particular point?
Yeah, it depends on the specific elemental subtype, but some elementals absolutely would be born with a completed Dianus point or a wellspring, depending on what your culture is, or a vessel. Some of the other cultures call it that, for a specific essence type. Yes, that would mean that that specific Dianus point is already used, and you would not be able to build another Dianus point in that same location, or at least not without serious consequences.
From Ghostito, I don't know if this has ever been answered yet, but I've always seen Corin as somewhere on the autistic spectrum. Was that on purpose in the writing or just a coincidence?
Corin is designed to be a neurodiverse character. I do not give him a specific neurodiverse diagnosis because I am not a mental health professional. But I ascribed qualities to him that I attempted to make consistent, and those qualities could be interpreted by readers as being qualities of autism or ADHD or obsessive compulsive disorder or consequences of the fact that he is abused or any combination thereof. There are a lot of comorbidities that are possible there too. Somebody could both be on the autistic spectrum and have ADHD or that sort of thing. So I am not a medical professional. I don't want to give you a specific medical diagnosis, but yeah, he's somewhere in there.
From non-specific, you get the power set of one of Vinaya's world makers. Which maker do you pick?
One of Vinaya's world makers. See, that's an interesting way of phrasing that could lead to some spoilers, and I don't know if I want to tell you who counts as being one of Vinaya's world makers. There's some subjectivity there as well as some spoiler territory. That's a tough one. I don't think I can answer that without major spoilers. So I'm gonna say let's hold off on that until I discuss World Makers a little bit further.
From Elscholar, which continent is the most interconnected with the other continents?
Probably Tyrrhenia. Tyrrhenia is probably the continent that has the most connections. There are clear connections between Tyrrhenia and Artinia, Tyrrhenia and Dania, and Tyrrhenia and a number of other places that I haven't talked about even like slightly. So yeah, probably Tyrrhenia. Artinia is probably a close second.
From BB Trombone, how are you planning on balancing writing this series versus other continuing series or starting a new thing?
I am not planning to start any other new series until I have closed this out. In terms of balancing it with other things, it's really a matter of I tend to try to make sure that I am continuously progressing Arcane Ascension while also having at least one other series that I am actively working on at any given point in time. If people are super interested in this series and invested in it, this will be my primary other series aside from Arcane Ascension until Arcane Ascension wraps. If people decide this is terrible and they are completely uninterested in it, I will probably switch back over to focusing more on either Weapons and Wielders or continuing with my possible War of Broken Mirrors sequel series, which, I said I wouldn't be starting anything else. Continuing War of Broken Mirrors is kind of a borderline on that, but I do definitely need to continue that in some fashion at some point in time.
From Dr. Timor, which books do you wish you could rewrite to make them more consistent with the greater universe?
Forging Divinity, definitely. Forging Divinity has all sorts of problems. Stealing Sorcery to a degree as well. I think that for the most part, my other series are pretty good. Sufficiently Advanced Magic definitely needs some cleanup here and there, where I was not certain about certain things. If I was rewriting Sufficiently Advanced Magic from scratch, I'd do a lot differently. But if I'm just tweaking things, there isn't as much that I would change as there is for something like Forging Divinity. For Forging Divinity, I've considered an actual rewrite. I don't think I'm going to because I don't think it's worth the effort. But I do think that there is probably going to be a reforged edition someday where I add in additional perspective chapters like the rest of the War of Broken Mirrors has. So interludes and possibly perspective chapters for our fourth character that is in the rest of the War of Broken Mirrors books. That could get spoily about certain things, but I might do that. I also think that I probably should be giving a different intro. There are events that are talked about that happen a couple months before the story that probably should be in the story as a prologue. So, yeah, there's a lot I would do differently with Forging Divinity. That's probably the best answer.
From Al, what's your favorite movie of 2023 so far?
Across the Spider-Verse, probably?
From Sterling, what question are you hoping to be asked today?
Oh, I'm not thinking enough for that. I can't give you a good answer for that. I'm just all in like panic about book release mode. So I don't have that level of creativity for you right now.
From L Scholar, what is the conceptual or direct opposite of sword essence?
I mean, I don't have a direct opposite because for things that are that complicated from an essence structure perspective, there really isn't one. Like I could try to come up with like all of the derived essence type stuff and what something would be from an opposite of that, but even then it would still be a human's cultural conception of what the concept is. So I think the clearest answer that I could give you would be that, in world, somebody might consider something like shield essence to be an opposite of sword essence. It, from a magic system standpoint, really isn't, in terms of it would absolutely not have the opposite mana types or that sort of thing. But in terms of a like battlefield role style, something like shield essence would be an obvious answer.
From non-specific, have you considered what a highly advanced or far future civilization would look like in the setting?
Absolutely. I've considered writing that someday, but we're a long way off from that.
From Sterling, so if there is a Star Eater, is there a Star Cutter?
Not in the exact same sense, but I can say yes, but read and find out.
From Demon, what's the answer to the question you're hoping to be asked today?
Yeah, we're going to have to skip that one, sorry.
From Glarung, will we get to see a star speak to any of our favorite characters?
Eventually, yes.
From Al, what's the question you don't want to be asked today? And why is it? What's the question you want to be asked today?
Yeah, we're gonna skip all those hypotheticals for the moment.
All right. From Orthus, with language being such a reoccurring theme in your novels, are there new twists on the concept you had fun playing with in Edge of the Woods?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't say that I do too much with language as a whole in the setting compared to a lot of authors who are much more in depth about actually writing entire constructed languages and that sort of thing. But I do a lot of wordplay in here. That's mostly English language wordplay. There's some Japanese language wordplay too. I don't do too much of that because I've only got 3 years of Japanese language behind me and I'm not an expert. But there's definitely some of that in a similar sense to what you might see in something like the parody types of stuff that I do in Demon King.
I, I would say that you do a lot with language in your novels, and if people pay attention to the linguistics that you put in, a lot of your linguistic choices and the words and the languages you choose to use for things are actually like hints and foreshadowing for other things.
That's all true. But so like word choice and word play, that's very relevant. What I'm saying is I don't do a lot with conlangs specifically.
Yeah, yes, because I was gonna say, because like based on how you use language, and I'm assuming that this is what Orthus is referencing with the question. I would say that there are huge twists.
That's fair.
All right. From Sterling, now that you've mentioned the miasma, is it viable to be only partially changed by the miasma in a way that is beneficial or gives you a power with minimal drawbacks?
Yep. We'll go into that in the future, but definitely.
From Ghost, what non-Ayara S would be the one you would least like to have as an enemy?
I mean, you definitely don't want Jason as an enemy either. That ends very badly for certain characters. So yeah, that's the easy answer there.
But Jacinth isn't an S.
Oh, okay. Oh, you said S's specifically.
Yeah, specifically an S that is not one of Ayara's.
Right. I thought you were just talking about Vegas. No, in terms of S's.
Which for me, like the only one I know of is Saffron. So.
I mean, Sterling's an S too. Sterling is also an S that we've already introduced. Then there are lots and lots of other ones. I mean, Silk's an S. We talked about Shard as an S as well.
Yeah, but I would not say that Silk or Sterling are not part of Ayara's crew.
So, okay, you definitely don't want to offend Steel.
Okay.
There's the comedy side of that, and then there's you actually really don't want to offend Steel.
So you're saying that Steel is another person thumbing their nose at Ayara?
Steel is an actual character in the story, and you'll find out more about Steel in the future.
Okay. From Stagnant Flux, is there a Ghost Forge on each continent, or is there a single Ghost Forge that is so important that it's recognized far and wide?
There's more than one Ghost Forge. They're not the same thing, but there isn't one on every continent.
From Al, how long would it take for Peak Karis to run a lap around the forest from Edge of the Woods?
I don't have a canon answer to that because I haven't actually figured out the exact circumference of the forest. It would if we're peak Garrus, like getting into nonsense like body of annihilation territory. We're talking like near instant. So that's the answer that I'll give you. If you're talking true peak Karis, then that's actual speedster nonsense.
Is it really? I don't think when you can cut through space, I think that's cheating a little bit from running around the circumference.
Even just his run speed, though.
Okay.
So even just his run speed in that form is absolute nonsense. That's not necessarily a good thing for anybody involved, because it means that it's almost impossible for anybody to stop him if bad things are happening with him, and they usually are if he wants to try to use something like that. If we go into just Body of Dawn territory, like I could math that if I had the circumference, but I don't. So minutes.
All right. From Elsecolor, what is the best way to determine the composition of a rare essence for the purpose of mixing it and harvesting it yourself?
Having an essence type and appropriate techniques for casting a spell that is a detection spell for identifying composition.
From Extradition, is it possible to create a closed system that sustainably generates more essence than it consumes?
Oh, of course you want to make a perpetual motion machine. I'm not going to give you a clear answer to that, but probably not. It certainly wouldn't be easy. If it's truly a closed system, I'm going to lean no. Complexities aside, okay, it would be impractical.
I would say that the closest thing that you're going to get to that is making a planet.
Sure. And getting into making a planet or
And
other
it's not a
forms
closed
of
system. Yeah, this is not a closed system, though.
it's not. It's not. It has access to certain dominions, and even if we get into the dominions that I'm not talking about, that are the big four that I haven't given you a name for, if you get into that, maybe one of them could pull that off, maybe, but I wouldn't call that a closed system at that point. So yeah.
All right, from Ghost. Is there a destiny mark for authors? And if so, what does it do?
There are a few possible ones. I mentioned stories or narrative earlier, so those are possibilities. You could have a writing essence. Any of those could correspond to a specific type of destiny mark. I have not written a writer destiny mark yet, but there absolutely could be one.
From BB Trombone, what is a good way for someone to transfer from just a book reader to being able to follow this Q&A?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that. So honestly, like, being in this community for a significant period of time and following the things in this discussion will help. Reading through the author answers that have been given in the past will help. But unfortunately, the style of Q&A that we tend to do here is going to be heavily reliant on knowledge from previous discussions. That's the type of thing that people are going to be asking follow-up answers from things that have been answered in the past. I realize that makes this a poor experience for newer readers, and I'm sorry for that. But the best thing that I can tell you is that there's lots of archived previous discussions. They do recordings of previous Q&As, and then in terms of text answers, you can go to the Ask the Author/LARPers channel and look at Andrew answers to see things that I've answered in the past in text format, and just read through those.
That is true. These do tend to focus on subject and theory that is not necessarily needed for the stories in the books, but is stuff that people are interested in because it's the underlying stuff to the books.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these are going to be questions from fans who are very familiar with the setting and very invested in the setting. And by its nature, that means that they're going to be more advanced questions that your average book reader may not understand the context behind. And so I'm sorry for that. Maybe we'll do some intro for these things in the future that can go over questions that are sorted toward being more general questions first. We can talk about that.
Yeah, we can probably make that happen. All right. From Sterling, is the Smiling Sword Saint just Andarin when he's had a reason to be happy?
No. Wow. A direct answer for once. This is new.
From Glarung, was Anathema the lonely girl with wings made of blades that Karis remembered and then immediately forgot at the end of that one tournament round?
I don't know if I should give you that one or not, but that kind of answers the question in and of itself. So I'm going to say the answer is mostly yes.
From Sterling, what does Lance Rival look like for all us art lovers out here?
He's described within the book, so I'm gonna wait until you read the book, but he has a physical description in the book.
Also from Sterling, have you read or heard of Pale Lights, the new series by Erratic Errata, the author of Practical Guide to Evil?
I've read the beginning of Practical Guide to Evil. I've not read any of the new series. So I might have heard the name, but I've not read it.
Apparently, it is Pale Lights is an eldritch horror in Renaissance-esque times with low power fantasy story.
Yeah, it wouldn't be my thing. I'm not big into Eldritch horror.
From Demon, with all the inspirations for this series and the knowledge that an essence that Kester says is hero essence exists, is there a demon or demon king essence? And what kind of stuff does that do?
Hilarious. So these are all human given names for things. So it is possible that there would be an essence type that people would associate with our local version of the Demon King, which is the Ashen Lord. That's the name humans have given him. He would be the Ma'o or the Mazoku. So yeah, there would be certain specific types of essence that would be associated with him. In terms of whether or not he has one essence type that's like a Ma'o essence, I would actually probably lean toward no on that. It's more like he would probably have the something analogous to a Ma'o destiny rather than a Ma'o essence type. So that's getting more complicated into things that we'll have to discuss more later in this series. Also, what Kester calls hero essence would not probably be the same thing as people on Dania would call hero essence. So that's also important to know. Hero has a specific connotation to it that is different on Dania than it would be on Kaldwin. And so compositionally, hero essence would be different between those continents in the same way that sword essence would be different on Tyrrhenia or Artinia.
Well, it's not spoilered, so I guess it's already out there. All right, from Glaurung, is there a particular reason you put Scribe on Dania for the Edge of the Woods prologue?
Yes.
From
Great question.
What? Go ahead.
Great question. No, I'm obviously dancing around giving you a real answer there. I don't want to spoil too much about what's going on with Scribe. I think that's going to be really fun for War of Broken Mirrors readers to figure out. Is this Scribe our Scribe? What is this Scribe up to? Who is involved with this Scribe right now? Do we know what's going on with the other characters that are involved with Scribe's life? You will figure out that stuff gradually through the prologue, the epilogue, and the interludes of this book, and probably multiple other books later in the series.
From Race Nazar, will we be introduced to a character who actively tries to make different hybrid essence types with any degree of skill?
Yes.
From Glaurung, did you watch the live-action One Piece, and if you did so, did you like it?
Oh, I have been waiting to talk about this in some context, but I have been very hesitant to because I liked it a lot for the most part. I think it was a very good adaptation, probably the best live-action adaptation of an anime I've seen in many respects. Costume design, music design, absolutely phenomenal, and they hit a lot of the same moments that were really important in One Piece very effectively. I also love that they have an ethnically diverse cast, and they did a really, really good job with casting for that series. I will say that there are certain elements of fantasy racism that hit very differently in a live-action show than they do in an anime, and some of those I feel like were executed in ways that depending on how a watcher interprets them, could come across very awkwardly. So specifically, I'm obviously talking about the Fishman stuff. I feel like they did a really interesting job of trying to incorporate some of the later elements from way later in the manga and anime with the politics between characters like Arlong and Jinbei and things like that. But the way that they executed that, I don't know if it was too much. 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 I don't know if it was too mu I would say that I would be conflicted about recommending the series as a result of how they executed that in some ways. If you just are looking for a fun swashbuckling adventure, or just a accurate adaptation of One Piece, I actually think they did a really good job on that. But fantasy racism, it's really, really hard to do well, and I have not done it perfectly myself, like by any stretch of the imagination. But I think that I would have done some of the things that they did differently. That'll be the end of that question. Sorry. Go ahead. You can ask your stuff.
No problem. From BB Trombone, will we see anyone from Spider Division?
You already have.
I think the spirit of the question there is, like, in Arcane Ascension 5, is it actually going to be called out?
Maybe. I know people probably want some closure on that, so I'll think about it. Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, Spider Division was not that important, but I know people want answers, so I will probably, if I don't give it to you in the books, I will eventually probably give you a canon answer on who was in Spider Division.
From Elfie, was any of the Lien Anna pretend play based on your own childhood experiences?
Oh, sure. Not quite like super directly, but I used to do like fantasy role play stuff with people like Reka all the time when we were kids. I would say that in some respects, what Leanne and Anna are doing is more childlike than what we were doing, and in some respects less so. But a lot of it is me and Reka and Rowan and people like that as teens and preteens, playing with wooden sticks and having our adventures when we were children, absolutely inspired that sort of thing.
From Stagnant Flux, if you spill sugar in front of a Ziphiad, do they have to count each grain?
No. The Fey counting fixation is not one of the cultural elements that I have adopted for the specific Fey that appear within the scope of this story.
From Glaurung, what are some fun things someone could do with cat essence?
I don't want to go into too much about animal essence subtypes, but you could look into using it for communication. You could look into it for using things like partial shape-shifting, complete shape-shifting, sensory enhancement or changes, lots of things that you can play with that type of stuff. That we will probably get into with characters if I write a second series on this continent that is third person perspective, multi-perspective, with some of the cast of that series more. But we'll probably talk about it in this one eventually to some degree. But it would be more important if we write some of those other characters.
From Caithden, with all of the Liadrin questions, and since you've brought up Thunderbolt Fantasy many times in the past, what would Edgeless Blade be in Liadrin?
It's a great question. I don't have a list or absence of word in Liadrin off the top of my head, so I can't give you a great translation for that. But that's a fantastic question, especially because Edge and Blade both. I've used Lien for both, so that would get funny. There's probably a second word that I could use for having a difference in clarification there rather than having Lien something Lien. But yeah, Thunderbolt Fantasy, definitely recommend it. Absolutely love that. Shofukan or Shangbuhan, depending on which version of the character's name that you want to use. He's kind of peak Karis in some of those episodes. So if you're a Karis fan specifically, I was amazed at how Karis Shofukan goes in some of those episodes. Phenomenal. It's a little darker than my stuff tends to be. More War of Broken Mirrors, but lot of overlap between a Shofukan or Shangbuhan character and an older jaded Karis. There's a lot of similarities there. Definitely recommend it.
From Telian Solaris, how high is the general spice tolerance of the continents?
It's totally gonna depend on where you are in any given continent because there's lots of different subcultures on these continents. So that's a difficult thing to answer on a global scale. They've definitely got curry on Caldwin, so there's going to be some spiciness there. I don't even know which culture I'm going to say that curry's from because I don't have a clear like India analog in the setting yet. So I don't have a good answer for you. It's going to be culture specific. I'm going to say that your average Caldwinian probably has a higher spice tolerance than your average Mithralian, because I've already said that we've got curry, and you're going to have some spicy curries. But there's my terrible answer for you.
From Orthus, have any in-world stories or books we've heard about been based around Danian legends or stories?
Absolutely. I'm not going to tell you which ones, but you're gonna figure it out. I think people are gonna be like, "Hey, this is supposedly fictitious character we heard about in another series sounds a lot like this real person in Dania."
From Sterling, what would Steele think of Little Bro Edge?
Little Bro Edge has a lot to learn.
Got to get good with that stab.
Yeah, that's true. He's not nearly good enough at stabbing yet, or dodge rolling, or harem essence.
From That Guy Media, what would Reika's favorite snack or treat be if she were in a cafe reading Dragon's Damsel?
I mean, coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. But Reika's here and Reika can give a better answer in the Q&A chat or come to the stage if Reika wants to answer that more clearly.
Reika has said so many cakes.
Oh, there you go, cakes.
From Al, who wins the beauty pageant among all of the protagonists in your stories?
Again, Dawn would kill me if I don't answer Dawn, so I can't not answer Dawn for something like this.
Dawn's beauty is so radiant that you can't even see.
That's true. You're just blinded by how beautiful Dawn is.
From Lonely Cloud, why did you choose the title Edge of the Woods?
Oh, it is a very layered title. I like doing those, but this title goes 4 or 5 layers deep at least. Actually, I'm going to say 3 or 6 because of numbers, but lots and lots of layers to that. Obviously, Edge of the Woods is a reference specifically to Edge as a character or Leanne as a character. If you look at Edge of the Woods and the Lost Edge, you can construct the Lost Woods, which is a area in the Legend of Zelda, so that's another layer to that. Edge of the Woods can also refer to the forest as a boundary or barrier or kekai. Edge of the Woods can also refer to the other swords in the story, like Anathema. There are lots and lots of layers. I'm not even going to go into all of them right now, but tons and tons of them. It's definitely one of the ones that has the most meanings to it of my titles.
All right. We already did a prologue one, so I guess I'll just keep going. Okay, from Sterling, in the prologue chapter, Scribe seems to not see or mention similarities between Edge and Karis. Is this because he hasn't seen Karis's developments that make him more similar to Edge, or because he doesn't think about Karis for another reason?
I am not going to give you a clear answer to that question. Whether or not this scribe is familiar with Karis or not, you're going to have to figure out from context clues.
From Race Nazar, is it fair to compare essence sorcerers to harvesters in the terms of the need to obtain essence for their development?
There are similarities, but they are definitely not the same thing.
From Duke, can we have the name that hasn't been revealed yet of a world maker from any world?
I don't remember which ones I've already told you. So obviously, I think I've told you the Kelrian Pantheon already. So I'm not going to go over those again. In terms of the local ones that you're familiar with from the stories that have occurred on Caldwin and things like that.
I'll say in the tabletop RPG, there's one that I sort of like I slipped in as a reveal, and I don't think many people caught it. So if you want to give an official answer for that, you could use that.
Did you use Ator? Because I think Ator.
No, Ator is already mentioned in the novels. I did the Maker of Machines.
Okay. So I guess I could pull up the other makers. And no, let's not give him Maker of Humans. Let's not give him Maker of Machines. Let me give him something more interesting. Trying to think of one that's an obscure one that would be Soldak. I'll give you Soldak. And that is one of Rendelier's makers. And Soldak will eventually be relevant in the story.
From Demon, any thoughts on Baldur's Gate 3? Would their game format be something you'd consider for a Vanaya game?
Really interesting question. So I'm not playing Baldur's Gate 3 because I don't like parasite horror specifically. It's a personal mental health tick for me. So I'm familiar with the Baldur's Gate franchise though, and I'm still following the game and all the things that they're doing with it. I think that what Larian does with both Baldur's Gate 3 and the Divinity games in terms of having a game that's similar to your classic Infinity Engine games, but with multiplayer support, that I absolutely love. That's phenomenal. I also love their general level of reactivity and things like that. So in terms of, would I like to see something that is like a multiplayer Infinity Engine game with lots of reactivity and stuff? Absolutely. I would not want something that plays like a Larian game in terms of the amount of body horror and such that they tend to get into in both Divinity and in terms of Baldur's Gate 3. Larian as a creator, they're phenomenally good. Like one of the absolute best RPG developers in the market. But their writing team has a habit of getting into horror elements very heavily in ways that I would not want explored in Arcane Ascension or any of my other stuff. Tonally, it's not appropriate. And I don't know whether or not their writing team would be appropriate for writing something that is in such a different style. I would be thrilled to have something that is a Infinity Engine with multiplayer and reactivity style thing, but the way that they took Forgotten Realms and then specifically focused on horror elements, to me, that's more of what I would have expected out of like a Planescape game. I would probably not have gone with that style of tone for a Baldur's Gate 3. And that difference in opinion on the approach to it means that there are elements of Baldur's Gate 3 that I would not approve of in exploring an Arcane Ascension title, if that makes sense.
From non-specific, if Valian were isekai'd to Earth, magic intact, how long would it take him to conquer the world?
I mean, you couldn't mention that in seconds. It would depend on if you wanted to, actually. So we'd have to get into Valian's motivations on that. So the actual answer to that is it would take time for him to evaluate whether or not he would want to take any kind of action like that. And the answer is probably yes. I will say that Valian is unambiguously a villain from the perspective of the most of the protagonists of my series. However, a Valian taking over our modern day Earth might actually be a net upgrade. Because of the particular style of villainy that Valian has. Valian is definitely a villain for a lot of different reasons. We'll get into Valian and his motivations and his behaviors more in the series. He's a major character that you'll get into eventually. But Valian conquering Earth for the vast majority of people on Earth, might actually not be a bad thing.
Oh boy, what a time for me to be given permission to speak.
I know. Hi, Ray.
I cannot disagree with that, though. I want to, but I can't. But that's less a reflection on Valian and more of a reflection of the state of our world right now.
Yeah, which we won't get into too much because, ow. But yeah, complicated. But yeah, that's an interesting scenario, and it would be fun to see how that panned out. Fun for some people, anyway.
I think that Valian is a highly effective tool when he could be manipulated.
Sure. I would call him a tool, but
So would I.
but and you know what? If Valian came into Earth, Valian and I would have a very long chat because Valian would find me immediately. And that actually might also make some significant changes in how Valian would treat conquering Earth. So, you don't want to put that much power in my hands, believe me. No one can be trusted with that, and certainly not me. But that would definitely influence how things pan out. Words. I should drink water.
How is your day going, Reika?
Oh, very badly, actually. This is a good diversion.
Oh,
How are you?
I am okay.
Good.
All right.
Still here.
Okay. I was just about to ask if you stepped away to get water or you were just taking a drink. Okay.
I've got like a quarter left in this bottle. I will step away to get another bottle in 10 minutes or so.
Okay. From Race Nazar, is there anything that you haven't gotten to show in the books that you would want to talk about or show off?
Oh, so many things. I would love to show you so many things. Reika's original PC is a big part of that, and you'll see you'll kind of see that character in this book, but only sort of kind of. And that's absolutely something that Reika and I, we really want you to meet that character at some point, but it's got to be done in the right way. So that's one big answer there for you. But there's a lot of other ones too.
What was the question? I stopped listening for 2 seconds.
So, what's something that I haven't had a chance to go into in the story yet that I'd like to talk about? And
Okay, yes.
and, your OGPC is definitely a big part of that.
Indeed. A big part of things that I am excited for.
Absolutely, you got to write that book.
I'm writing the other one first.
I know. They don't know, but I know.
No, yeah.
I mean, it needs to happen at some point, because if it never happens, then there's no way to force them to have government offices against their will.
No.
All right. From Ghost, to add more confusion to the discussion around stars and stars, is there an S called star?
Almost definitely. And there's one I almost gave something very close to that for AA5, but I think I've decided against it. But there probably will be just as an S named Star eventually.
From Sterling, is Ayara's organization a relevant organization on Dania?
Yes. Reika hates that answer.
I hate it.
From Kumakun, since we're getting into the Flash comparisons, could Karis cut through time for a specific reason?
Read and find out.
From Jolteon, would it be possible to get famous or powerful enough to generate your own essence type?
Yes. Yes.
From Newbie1, follow up to the Flash question. If Karis did manage to mess with time without using time sorcery, would the time elementals care?
If they knew about it.
From Dr. Timor, how far ahead do you outline your series, considering you said that Lost Edge could go on for a long time?
So I have a plan for Lost Edge that could theoretically go dozens of books if I wanted to, but I probably won't end up doing that. I don't think it's going to be popular enough to warrant that. So for something like Lost Edge, I have a very high level outline for several books ahead, and I also know how I want the series to end if I go super long. I also have several other possible endpoints that are more realistic endpoints that are sooner. So, like, I could end after one arc very easily. There is also a second arc breakpoint that I could stop it at. But that's pretty high level stuff. It's not like I have like full book outlines for things that far in advance. In terms of pre-planning for the series and stuff, I'm gonna terrify people by saying this, but like Shades of Ruin, if I follow my current plan, there's a good chance that we won't get to Shades of Ruin until I have another 10 to 15 other books out. And I have strongly considered adjusting my plan for that, but it is fair to say that I already have an outline for Shades of Ruin as a trilogy. So an adaptation of one of my LARP campaigns as a trilogy. That's already outlined, and that would, if I followed what is my current plan and structure, that could end up being like books 25 through 28 in this setting. I will probably end up doing some things so that I can do it sooner than that. But that should give you an idea of the scope of the types of things that I've pre-planned. That's also not the latest point in the series that I've pre-planned, but it is the latest point in the series that I have an actual outline doc for.
From Telian Solaris, are you in Spider Division?
I probably wouldn't be, actually. I would probably be in... I'm just going to go ahead and say that I would be in the 7th Division, almost definitely.
Interesting evasion. Probably.
Probably.
From That Guy Media, how do you pronounce Solis, and do you work with the narrators on pronunciation?
So Solis is how I pronounce that, but the pronunciation, I don't work with them directly. I record a pronunciation guide that will have some of the names. In particular, I tend to pronounce Japanese names, since my narrators don't necessarily have the same level of Japanese knowledge that I do, or they might have more, actually. But it's good to give them an example. So for characters like Muramasa or characters like that, I'll say those names, or for Japanese words. For some other characters, if they're like a bizarro fantasy name that could be pronounced a lot of different ways, I'll pronounce that too. But you know, for a character that has a very normal name like Lydia or Hannah, I usually won't bother with something like that unless I need to, or I'll just write pronounced like the standard English language name.
From Elsecolor, what essence and natural environment do you think would create the most fascinating essence-suffused location for you personally?
Fascinating is a tricky question. Most useful would probably be something like a long abandoned library. Like if I found some sort of, you know, abandoned Atlantean library, or, you know, a mirror universe version of the Library of Alexandria that was fully intact, that'd be a good place for me to do my cultivation.
From Jolteon, if enough people permanently shapeshifted themselves into a new, not previously existing species, would that species' essence become a thing?
Eventually, yes.
From Sterling, what type of writing tools are common on Dania, and where is the literacy level around?
Depends on the specific area of the continent, but pens. You can expect quill pens in a lot of places, and you look in like major cities and stuff, you'll see things like ballpoints.
From Orthus, you mentioned earlier in the Q&A that travel plays a large part in progression in essence sorcery. Does this draw on tropes from cultivation style novels, Wandering Cultivators specifically?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I would say that it's a mixture between what you would expect out of your classical wandering cultivator stuff, and the whole wandering hero style genre or martial hero genre, which I'm specifically trying not to pronounce because even though Krita was kind enough to tell me how to properly pronounce these genre terms, I'm going to dodge around it instead of butchering Chinese today. So there you go. Lessons learned, but badly because I'm terrible at pronouncing Chinese. So yes, you can expect things that are similar to your classical wandering cultivator style stories. There are also elements that I would say are more strongly borrowed from things like Final Fantasy V on with job class systems and to give you a more modern example, Octopath Traveler. Octopath Traveler is a really good example of one of the other styles of travel that I have, where there's a lot of focus on going around and meeting people and also ancient shrines and ruins and also the ability to acquire things like powers from various ancient magical crystals and stuff. So yeah, Octopath Traveler is a good example of that style.
I'm going to prod you to refill your water.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go get another water and take a quick break.
Okay. Does Elfie have another question for me to answer to fill time, or shall I
Well-
just improvise?
I have a question that I asked you last time that I didn't get to ask Reika. So, Reika, what's your favorite zoo animal?
My favorite zoo animal. Oh, well, I actually really love snakes. Which is probably why Rega had the reaction to the giant snake in Weapons and Wielders. That was very much that was a nod. Aside from that, it's less that I really have a favorite zoo animal and more that I really love going to the zoo with my husband because my husband is a giant animal nerd. So he'll just lead me around and tell me all the little facts about all the critters. My favorite zoo animal is actually my husband.
Excellent.
Oh, I love all these snake memes that I'm getting in the chat. This is perfect. This is adorable.
Have either of you played a recent video game that came out, Stray Gods?
No,
Mhm.
my laptop can't support video games right now. Need a new one.
That is unfortunate. Stray Gods probably doesn't need too much power. It's very much vignette still images and text based. But it is amazing if you have a chance to play it. I highly recommend it to anybody. It is it's kind of like the Telltale Adventures, where it's a kind of a novel sort of or a comic sort of experience where you are choosing responses for your character, and playing the role of a main character. But it is a musical.
Oh my gosh. I need this.
Okay.
What's it called again? I need to write this down.
Stray Gods.
Okay. That is brilliant.
And it has instead of choosing do you want to attack or bluff or diplomacy or anything like that, you choose what the tone of the music is going to be for this particular stanza.
Oh my gosh.
Incredible.
That is brilliant, and I need it.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I'm gonna have to take a look at that too.
Very good. I played it. It's very interesting. A well-used trope of a core story. It is modern-day Greek gods.
Sure, those are fun though.
But very well played, and the fact that they were able to do a choose your own musical game is insane.
That is insane. That's awesome. Speaking of treaded tropes, I'll also say that in terms of the exploration elements of this setting, I also have, and this isn't explored much in the first book, but there is a Adventurers Guild analog on this continent, and that will be a thing that plays in if I get further in the series, or if I do the third-person multi-perspective series later, where I will have my Adventurers Guild XP being a major element of that. So that's another story narrative element that's pretty important on this continent as a whole, and to the style of exploration that you'll see.
That particular organization, it threw me for a loop. I have been calling it the Adventurers Guild for so long that I forgot that isn't actually its name.
And I'm fine with that. I think everybody's going to call it that, but there are going to be a few different names that are used, and there actually might be multiple guilds. Like there's the official one that you were working on with your PC was like the Ruin Reclamation Society or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we also have the Shrine Seekers they talk about in this story. I've debated whether or not Shrine Seekers actually have their own separate organization, or if it's just the Ruin Reclamation Society or whatever. So there are the possibilities there. And then there's the Explorers Guild, and whether or not the Explorers Guild is actually the same thing as those other two, I have not actually decided yet.
Based on tabletop, like there's a lot of overlap apparently. So
Yes, absolutely.
all right, from Dr. Timor, which character has the most Riz essence?
I don't think I can give you a good answer to that.
I can.
So, okay, give me. Is it Ishi? Like, who are you thinking?
What? The most Riz essence is Jace, regardless of what Ayara thinks.
Oh, okay.
Because, if you just take the essences for what they are, if you're gonna make an essence have the aspect of charisma in it, it's gonna be Lai's essence.
I mean, it depends on how you're approaching charisma. So, like, Lai's essence is great for the, compulsion style of Riz. But there's also just, diplomacy and presence. And Ishi is a professional ambassador. So, that's a different kind of charm.
I'm also going to go ahead and say that Redacted is a strong contender here.
Oh, Redacted, of course.
Just saying.
That is fair. I always lean towards Lies because there's a lot of essence use that you can use with Lies that it specifically increases diplomacy and social interaction.
That is not the only reason that you always lean towards Lies.
Rather than specifically control and manipulation. But yeah.
No, I mean, Jace is definitely a great social character. But yeah, different types of charisma are out there in the setting.
All right, from Toxiferous, how far along are you in your other works right now? AA5, Weapon Wielders 4.
AA5, I'd say it's really tough to quantify because I don't know what the end point is going to be, but somewhere right below half probably. It's been coming along, but I've slowed down on it a little bit, both because of burnout and because of just juggling other tasks. Between this launch and life in general, there's been a lot going on. So I'm going slower than I'd like on AA5, but I'm definitely making progress. I also have the whole thing outlined and scene by scene now, which will speed it up. I don't always do that before I just write everything, but full scene by scene outline is something I do sometimes in order to expedite my progress and make it more coherent, and I do have a full scene by scene outline for the whole book at this point. Weapons and Wielders 4, that's complicated for reasons that Reika and I may not be talking about yet, but progress is being sort of made, but slowly, I would say, on my end. I won't say more than that.
From Ghost, If Karis were to name an essence Reka Essence, what would some of the properties of that essence be?
Wow.
I mean, fear of ducks, obviously,
Okay.
liking cake, having some big dragon wings, enjoying romance novels. You know, it's hard to bake Reka into one essence type or cake.
This feels
Um,
really reductive.
what are you going to do with essence types, though? Come on, like,
What about just being an unmitigated badass?
oh
I was-
yeah, sure, badass essence.
I was
Sure,
going
we'll
to
go
say
with that, right?
enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm. Yeah, that's
Sure.
true. She is very enthusiastic.
That's a more politic answer than mine. So I guess if Karis is in the right mood to be political about it, then sure, something like that.
No, I think it would be essence of comfort.
Or blankets. Blankets
Blanket.
is also an option.
Yeah. Coffee.
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 That's the essence she needs to live.
That's me. I don't know if that's Reka. There is a
That's fair.
difference.
All right. From Ghostito. Out of all the characters in this world so far, which was your favorite to write?
That's such a difficult question. I mean, it's probably in terms of favorite to write in small doses. It's probably a comedy character like Steel or Travis the Orc Slayer or that sort of thing. I absolutely would not want to write like a whole book of that style. Uncertain Doom. Uncertain Doom's a great one. In terms of writing about a character long term, you know, it's got to be one of my main characters that I like writing them for a reason. So, you know, Corin or Lydia or Karis or Jonan or that sort of thing.
I agree. Travis the Orc Slayer should only be taken in small doses.
Just very
Yeah.
sparingly.
All right. From Al, Arm Baby plushies win.
I would never. How dare you? First off, how dare you? Second off, moving on.
From Demon. If harvesters are intended to gather and return essence to the dominions, but are also essence sorcerers who need that essence to get stronger, how do they reconcile those two elements?
I'm not going to go into physiology for harvesters and gatherers right now. That might actually come up at the books at some point. So let's hold off on that one.
From Stagnant Flux. What are some aspects of traditional Fae that you incorporated into Danian fairies?
Weakness to iron. And again, this is not going to be universal. So again, I use Fae as a cultural umbrella rather than referring to every individual species as being Fae. So this is going to be applicable to some characters in the story and not others. But things like weakness to iron, things like not lying for various different reasons, things like being very careful with specific types of deals, contracts being a huge deal, word as a bond being a huge deal, true names being a huge deal, also wordplay and linguistics in general, rules of three being important, so referring to things 3 times, saying something 3 times, that sort of thing. Those are some of the main ones. There are others, but I would say at a high level, those are some of the most important ones.
From Elscholar, to clarify my previous Edge question, his personality and mannerisms have been described as stereotypically edgy in things like shouting attack names and such, but you've implied that those aspects are edging into spoiler territory. Why is that?
Yeah, he's got kind of a Chunibyo kid thing going on early in the story. So the part of that is just genuinely as a child enjoying doing that sort of thing. However, when you see some similar elements as an adult, some of that might still be he enjoys doing that sort of thing, but some of it is that the older version of him has some elements of his personality that are a certain level of obfuscation in his demeanor, and that'll be clear as you read the story. I don't want to go too deep into that, but he is a more complicated character than he appears to be on the surface.
From Sterling, Valian versus Goku. Valian has prep time. How does the fight go?
I mean, Valian prepares a lot of food for Goku to eat, and Goku eats the food, and Goku is happy. Like, there's no reason to fight Goku if you don't have to fight Goku. And if this is you have to beat Goku, you still absolutely can do that by giving Goku food. As overpowered as Goku is, he is not a very smart person, and he is shown to being vulnerable to conventional things like heart disease. So, if there's prep time and no time limit, Valian learns about how Goku has died in certain timelines, and eventually Goku dies of cholesterol.
Incidentally, food as distraction also works on Reika.
Oh, that's fair. Reika and Goku have a lot in common. In a good way. I love Goku.
From Demon. Are there any specific misunderstandings about lore that you see in the community that you feel comfortable correcting?
I mean, I see quite a few of them here and there, but there's nothing that's really singing to me at this particular instant in time that I feel like I need to correct. So, this requires Andrew to have better prep time to answer that. So we'll skip that one for the moment.
From Stagnant Flux, if you were able to ask any question to one of your characters, who would it be and what would you ask?
As a writer, I feel like I already can kind of do that. So it's difficult to answer that question. I'm going to try to think so I can actually give you a coherent answer to that. So what I would want to do is, assuming that these characters are capable of extrapolating beyond what I have already written, I would be interested in talking to one of the characters that has a truly non-human perspective and seeing what they have to say on a certain subject matter. Like, I would love to sit down and have a chat with a Transcendence Elemental and just get their perspective on how things work and how things should work. Because I think it would be fascinating to hear the insights of a character that has a truly alien way of thinking in general.
From Ghost, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone who has just joined the plot team of an established LARP?
Oh boy, that's a great one. Make the game about your players. That's the absolute biggest piece of advice I will give anybody who is running a LARP. That it is very, very easy, and I have been guilty of this. It is very easy for a game runner to incorporate things into a game specifically based around what they as a game master want to see happening. And a lot of that can lead into railroading the PCs so that the PCs have no agency, or introducing your own super powerful characters that interact with the other game master's super powerful characters and create NPC theater. And that's not just a novice move. That's something that very experienced veteran game masters often end up doing. And so I would say that my insight, and I am not perfect about this myself. I've never been perfect about this. And there are lines where it is reasonable for a game master to put in things that they're going to want to enjoy. Obviously, you want the game masters to enjoy the game too. But you got to remember to give players agency and the ability to affect the storyline. Assuming that you are writing the type of game that's built for, which you probably are. So that's my biggest bit of advice. Write the game so that the players can experience the world, but that they can shape their own story, rather than making it just your story and your art.
If I may give a bit of specific advice.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you to. Go ahead.
So specifically for joining a plot team that is already established, because that I believe was in the question, ask for any and all documentation that your previous plot team may have put together, and understand the fact that you are simply going to wind up making calls that contradict things. And then you as a plot team should discuss how you want to handle that moving forward, because it's going to happen. There is no way for you to know everything, and you shouldn't try to.
100%. Really good answer. Kester, how about you? Do you have any answers on that one?
I was gonna say, as a kind of as a contrast to what Reika said, learn everything you can about the setting and world, so that in order to be able to incorporate it with any improv skills that you have. One of my core abilities that I bring to a LARP team, and the ones that I've been a part of, is the ability to, on the fly, invent storyline on the spot for groups that are being overlooked in the setting, in order to Cobalt Nightmares, which Andrew brought up, had a huge issue with the NPC theater going on. My biggest role in that particular LARP was small scale story with individual groups of PCs, so that they felt like things were revolving around them rather than things revolving around this unreachable story that they didn't really feel like they had any way to affect. And learning all you can about the setting and the mechanics of the world will make you, anything that you improv, anything that you come up with on the spot, fit better within the world and storylines that are already being designed by the plot team, so that less of anything that you come up with isn't going to rub the wrong way with the story that is already being developed.
That's a really good answer, too.
Yeah, 200%. I mean, definitely try to learn everything, but also have a plan in place for when you inevitably do something that doesn't fit with the established world, because it will happen.
Oh, 100%. I mean, even if you're the one who created the setting, you're going to do things that don't match with canon. I forget stuff all the time.
It's the improv. Basically, just you're gonna make a mistake. If you know the setting well enough, you might be able to find a way to roll that mistake into being something that makes sense for story.
Yeah. Also, always try to either yes and or no but.
Oh yeah, that's another really good point. So give people answers to their questions or to the plots that they're pursuing that give them more hooks for the future, rather than just being like, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
All right. From Extradition, if someone in setting wanted to free themselves from the foibles of mortal flesh and become a being of machine and or magic, what advice would you give them?
Depends on what continent they're on. But there definitely are ways to do that in setting. We'll explore some of the things that are like that both throughout Arcane Ascension and probably in later stuff in Dania if we get that far. But so in terms of biological means of turning yourself into something that is not just human anymore or that sort of thing, high-level essence sorcery has some great ways of playing with that. If you want to be a cyborg, you're better off on Kaldwin. Kaldwin's better for cyborg tech.
From Elscolor, what would your name be? What would your S name be if you were in the orchestra?
Depends, because a lot of the common S words are already taken. So from a purely practical standpoint, if I wanted something like swordsman or something like that, that's probably already been taken. There's probably somebody who has something that generic. Storyteller would be a good one. again, probably taken, but pretty applicable to the way that I live. So storyteller's a good one. Aside from that, there was one I was thinking about earlier, and I'm trying to remember it. We'll go with storyteller for the moment. I might come back to this if I remember what I was thinking about.
From Demon, does Derek get an S name?
Yes,
Can you tell us what it is?
I could, but I'm not going to.
From Stagnant Flux, is there an S named Stagnant?
There is now, just for you. How your OC can exist.
From Ghost, what attunement would Reika the player, not the character, get if they took a standard judgment as a Caldwinian version of themselves?
That's a really good question, and one that relies heavily on whoever is adjudicating it and which specific spire it is. So there isn't a good answer for that for any real life human person. But like if I was just Andrew gonna throw Reika through a judgment, I don't know. That's a tricky one. I mean, Reika's another storyteller like I am, but also I think that Reika would probably enjoy something that gives a good amount of magical flexibility, but also biological, stat boosts, body control stuff. So, a contract attunement. Those are the cool ones. I'd probably lean to something like shapeshifter or conjurer, maybe.
I cannot believe that you would assign me any type of magic type.
Why not?
Because I'm a very physical person. Like,
Yeah, but shapeshifter? Come on.
Shapeshifter would be cool, but like summoner, no.
Well, conjurer is
Conjurer, right.
less. Summoner and conjurer are not the same. So you've read a little bit with that. You haven't read all the AA books, but conjurer just basically lets you manifest like your own dream stuff. It's like I would like there to be a box here now. So there's a box. Or, a phantasmal conjuration of a person that is based on your imagination of that person.
No, I do not want or need that power. I have severe ADHD, and this would be bad for everyone involved. Just give me physical stat boosts, and I will be happy.
Okay. All right. I'll keep that in mind for your judgment.
Wait, you've been judging me my whole life.
Well, that's true. You've been judging me too. There's been mutual judging.
Part of our great rivalry.
I would like to point out that when you take a judgment, you get the attunement you earn, not the one that you want or deserve.
Okay. I still think that I would probably come out with a very physically based attunement because I very much enjoy physical challenges.
Oh, you would, but I think shapeshifter actually works pretty well for that. It's a pretty punchy attunement. It's just a punchy attunement that lets you biohack yourself into having scales or whatever.
I could definitely go for shapeshifter.
All right. From Orthus, Reika, do you think the novels have properly expressed how dangerous Ayara is?
No.
I agree.
Not yet.
I agree with that too. You just only have seen bits and pieces of Ayara where Ayara is in genial mode for the most part. You haven't seen the Ayara that there are nursery rhymes warning people about.
Like the story of how Scribe got recruited that's edging in a little bit into this is probably where you want to think about the area you want to think about for how dangerous she is. But there hasn't really been any sort of concrete this is Ayara messing things up.
Yeah. Nobody's seen Ayara on a bad day.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Burning Scribe's family. Good day.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an easy day. Like, come on. That's something where, like,
Fire did all the work for you.
yeah, that's Tuesday.
All right. From Sterling, what would Dania's equivalent of the 6 sacred swords be?
You're gonna have to read and find out on that one. There's definitely answers there. So yeah. Keep reading.
From Dr. Timor, another question about writing. How detailed are your outlines? How much of it do you fill in as you're writing the book?
So that's a really good one. It depends heavily on the specific book. For when I was first getting started with Forging Divinity, hugely detailed outline. But now that I'm this deep into this series, most of my books in this setting don't have hugely detailed outlines. I do have, so let me just look real quick. So I don't have an outline at all for Edge of the Woods 2. What I do have is a to-do list that is currently about 3 pages of bullet points. And then I have a chapter to-do list that is currently blank because I haven't written it yet. But I do have a lot of things that I plan to cover in the book, but it is general stuff like training segment. Here's a bunch of bullet points for the types of training I'm going to go over somewhere in the book. Things like, these are abilities that I want to go through. These are character scenes that I want to include, but none of it's in order or anything like that. For Arcane Ascension 5, because I'm working on that actively right now, that I do have an actual outline for. Let me pull that up real quick. So that outline doc is, that document itself is only 4 pages. However, that's misleading because the actual novel document itself has about 15, 20 chapters where the chapters are already in the book as bracketed sections that explain everything that's going to happen in the individual scenes. So there's a lot of that for this particular book, where I've essentially done the outline in the book document rather than doing it in an outline document. So a lot of this varies from book to book. And I would say that the more familiar I am with the series, the less outlining I do, but I also do a lot of outlining after the fact, like what I'm doing with AA5, where I'm already 40-50% into it, but I've also gone through now and outlined every other scene that I plan to write. There will still be more scenes after that. I always add more, but I have a general outline for everything I plan to include in the book already.
You and I write very differently.
I mean, nobody should be surprised by that. We've always had different styles for this stuff, but for the book that we have talked about collaborating on that you're working on right now, that outline, I haven't done anything quite that detailed in quite a while, but Forging Divinity is more similar.
All right. From Sterling, if a cat cultivated enough human essence, would they eventually become human or humanoid?
They could. You could get yourself a cat boy or a cat girl that way. That is theoretically possible if that is the objective of how they wanted to apply that essence. There are ways that are better to do that, but yeah, eventually that is physically possible.
From Legendary Shorty, does your book universe connect to any other author's book universe?
No. So I do cameo jokes for things like the Climber's Court stuff, where you'll see Zorian from Other Learning show up or whatever. That's not canon. That's a tease. It's a nod and a wink, and it is not canonically in the same universe.
From Al, would any weapon in Vinaya survive clashing with Osriel's scythe from Cradle?
Yeah, a few of them probably would. I mean, so again, it's not a crossover. These are not canon, but yes, there are weapons that are on the scale of a judge level weapon, but functionally very distinct. my magic system works so hugely differently that it's hard to say how these things would work in terms of equivalencies. But like, I do have conceptual style weapons like Osriel's scythe in the setting.
From Elscholar, would it be possible to cultivate a gift of the god's essence on Dania?
Sort of. It wouldn't be exactly the same, but it is possible to make something that's analogous.
From Food Guy, when you're adapting something like your LARP campaign, how much has changed for the novel?
A lot. So something that you've got to keep in mind is that none of the books that I've written thus far are direct adaptations of anything from my tabletops or my LARPs. They are all things in the same universe, and they are all quite different. Even the characters that have shown up have been very different. The closest is probably Weapons and Wielders. In the case of Weapons and Wielders, I wrote some of that concurrently with running the game, so characters like Reka are actually pretty similar by comparison, but there are still differences. And things are not going to play out in the Weapons and Wielders books the same way that they did in the LARP. Timeline stuff will be different. Characters are going to be different. I don't feel obligated to make the books match the game. When you're writing a LARP with 50 plus people involved, that's too many moving parts to try to adapt it. And LARPs are messy. I can't be there to see everything that's happening in a LARP. And even if I could, mistakes will happen, or I will see something that happens that I regret happening in the LARP that I feel like narratively didn't really make sense. So I like to make sure that any character that I do adapt from a tabletop or a LARP feels like that character. Sometimes I think I've been more successful with that than with other characters. But in other characters' cases, or for narrative reasons, there have been major changes. And yeah, there are going to be major changes when I eventually get to doing something that's closer to a direct adaptation like Shades of Ruin. Like, a lot of the characters who were PCs in Shades of Ruin by necessity cannot exist, either because of settings changes or just because we had way too many people. I can't write a cast of, across all of the different Shades games. We probably had more than 100 individual PCs. Not in any given event, but over the course of 30 or 40 different events with people rotating in and out, we probably had over 100 different characters, some of which were played by, two people played by the same person. There's no way I'm writing that many protagonists in a book series. It just would not work. So by necessity, that means that there will be changes, and I just need to make sure that the overall story is as coherent as possible, and that the characters that I do choose to adapt are portrayed favorably and in the most organic way possible. So yeah,
also in a LARP, you have an issue of you want to make sure that every player feels like a main character. I mean, unless they are specifically choosing to play a character that is a supporting character to another story, but that is rare to happen. And yeah, like you said, you can do an ensemble cast book, but you can't do an ensemble cast book with 50 plus people.
Absolutely. Or maybe you could, but I wouldn't want to try. It's too much.
LARPs are so messy.
They are. And also a lot of the stuff in the LARPs was still being written while we were running it. So a lot of things in the LARP would be less coherent because the rules of the setting did not exist in the same fashion at that point. So there's a lot of things that won't really work because of, the power of retconium. And we've got to take that into account.
All right. From Extradition, do you need to take another drink of water right now?
Yeah, and I'm also going to check if the book is out, in our regions. I'm not sure, but it's 9 p.m. here on Pacific time, which means that it's midnight East Coast, and that means the book might be out. So I'm going to look.
It is out for the Central Time Zone. I just got an email about it.
Yeah,
I'm seeing it on Kindle. I'm not seeing it on Audible yet. So
yeah, my Kindle is showing read now. So
Yeah, so that's exciting. I think it's awesome that people can finally start reading the book. And if people want to just like jet out and do that, you're welcome to. I will stick around a little bit longer to answer more questions. I'm gonna grab some water though. So I'll be back in a minute.
I guess I should go buy the book. Just purchasing this on my phone right now.
I am out of
Got
ideas
it.
for entertainment, by the way.
Sorry. As am I. I'm trying to buy a book right now.
No. You buy your book. It's exciting.
This is the intermission where we promote the book and we say, "Go buy it." There you go.
Go buy the book. It's
Yeah,
really
go buy
good.
it.
It's great. Get the book. I'm definitely going to reread it. This is actually going to be the first book that I read.
The first book that you read, like, ever, or?
Kinda. I've been because I read I do the beta test, the beta reading,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then I never actually get around to reading the official release.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking I'm excited to actually read. I think I may go ahead and read one to see what he changed. Well, I have to see if he took my notes. So, you know. Important.
Very.
How do I buy this? I can't.
It got real weird with the phones. You have to buy it on Amazon and then send it to your phone.
Right, that's right. I remember. Okay.
Yeah, I actually had to open Amazon in the browser rather than using the app because it was being really weird.
No, that's right. I actually remember I had this problem. When I was trying to. Yeah, this is the intermission, figuring out how Amazon works.
Yeah, they did it. They did a thing where the Play Store will no longer let purchases for Kindle for ebooks go through without going through
Amazon
Google
is fighting
Store.
is fighting with iPhone. Basically, is what it comes down to.
I'm back, by the way, and I'll stick around for another maybe let's say 20 minutes or so. I want to make sure that the moderators can get some rest, and also that I can go make all of my release day posts and then have breakfast. So thank you for everyone for showing up and participating in this. We'll keep going a little longer, but I appreciate all the moderators for setting this up and all of the people who are here to listen and hopefully enjoy the book.
Yeah, I certainly look forward to and dread the questions that I will be getting in the question discussion channel tomorrow.
Oh yeah, and don't spoiler things for people if you are reading it. We have specific spoiler channels where you can discuss this if you're doing a read through and you want to go through and talk about it while you're reading. Make sure that you post in the right channels for that. So like the Dania channel or that sort of thing. I will probably read through what people are commenting on it tonight. So if anybody does want to go do that and wants me to read things, you've got some extra incentive. I'll probably read your comments.
I would say anybody who is willing, the Tag All Spoilers channel to do like live vlogging as you read. We love reading those. Yeah,
we love people live blogging that stuff. So if you feel like live blogging, we will be entertained by your live blogging. Oh, and the last businessy thing is, if you do read the book and enjoy it, please do leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads or both. Super important for the success of the book. So if you want me to be writing more in this series, please do that.
All right, let's power through some more of these questions before you have to go.
Absolutely.
From non-specific, could Ayara successfully steal a star from the sky and get away with it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. 100%.
From Ghost, would Valian have a lot of Riz essence?
You know, it's subjective. He's got kind of that like a gentlemanly villain thing going on. So I'd say yes to some degree. It depends on your interpretation of Riz, but yes, sure.
I think that where the confusion here is there may be a divide in how we are thinking about having Riz essence.
I'm thinking about it in terms of charisma in general, really.
Yes, no, I would say Valiant probably has a lot of personal Riz essence. When I was answering the question previously about Jace, I was thinking of it more along the lines of actively cultivating something that could be considered.
Oh yeah, Jace absolutely is the type of person who's like, yes, I am powered by the lies of the universe, but Valian less so. But Valian is the type of person who would have points in charisma, certainly, but in an evil way.
From Demon, for people with essences related to more sapient creatures, can respective creatures usually tell that they have it?
No. So it's contextual, but they might sense something that is similar, but your average just human walking around does not know if somebody near them has human essence. And the same is true for most other creature types. There are some specific creature types that are going to be more sensitive to that than others. And it also depends on the level to which you build it up, because at high levels, it might be more obvious.
Accepting cultural differences, is there a more common reaction or treatment of it if it is sensed?
It's really going to depend. There's going to be a huge difference between if you're a human with human essence, okay, so you're a non-human creature who has human essence. People see that and they're like, what? That's weird if they figure it out. What? Okay, that's a decision that you made. Are you trying to pretend to be a human? If so, it would really depend on the person, being like, huh, that's neat, or wow, that's suspicious. So person by person. It would be more socially acceptable if, say, some ancient wolf notices a human who has wolf essence. Depending on the specific wolf subculture, they might be like, you did a bad thing, or that's really cool. You are a wolf brother. You are wolf brother now. You are one of us. And so specific wolf culture matters, but it depends on the culture and the species involved.
From Stagnant Flux, what has been your favorite fight scene to write in all of the books published so far?
There are some good candidates for this, but I would say that overall the one that I keep coming back to is the Pale King fight in Diamantine. And so I think that that's probably overall the most just fun, bonkers, all over the place combat scene that I've written. I like it a lot. It's also interesting because it is a rare case where I walked in with my protagonist not beaten to hell in advance and not low on resources and actually gets to cut loose to some degree. I usually don't let my protagonists do that, and it's a rare example where I did, and I think it felt good to me as a writer doing that, and I think it felt good to readers to see that, since it's such a rarity.
From Telian Solaris, I think this is a typo, so I'm going to correct it. Which character would have the least Riz essence?
Oh, that makes me want to say mean things. So let's go with Magnus Cadence.
From Ghostito, which character in this world so far has the most insufferable personality, in your opinion?
Jacinth.
And why is it Lance Rival?
Insufferable is really going to depend on the person, which is why you got Reika hating Jacinth, and you hating Lance, whereas Krita loves Lance Rival. So super subjective. I'm going to say, to me, the fictitious version of Steel in the Stab books.
All right. From Newbie 1. Is the term "fae" as the creature? Is the term "fae" in reference to the creatures related to fae creation essence?
That will be explored within the story, but I'll just go ahead and say yes, to some degree.
From L Scholar, what is the most complicated essence that you know the general composition and abilities of?
Most complicated, I mean, it depends on how you define complicated. In terms of moving parts, it's probably something like Sword Essence because I've already given that. Or maybe one of those big four that I'm not telling you too much about, like Faye that you already just mentioned.
From Race Nazar, will we get to see some of Derek in his new role after AA4?
Yes.
From Sterling, does Edge have very many hobbies outside of sorting?
Depends on how you can consider very many, but he actually does have a few hobbies. Like I was surprised at how many hobbies he has. But yeah, he does. He is a progression fantasy lead that is very focused in this specific book on progression fantasy stuff. But yes, he absolutely does have hobbies.
From Dr. Timemore, is Derek's S name Soulblade?
It's not.
From Glaurung, since there is a fair amount of Final Fantasy inspiration in this universe, will we get to meet a Bahamut?
Sort of, maybe. I'm not going to use the specific name Bahamut. There are certain mythologies I'm willing to tap into for things like Seiryu and things like that, because I think that from a cultural standpoint, Japanese culture specifically has a positive, generally, this is not 100% ubiquitous, but Japanese culture generally has a positive impression of copying things that are fictitious or mythological elements of Japanese culture. Now, obviously, not every Japanese person is going to have the same impressions of this, but culturally speaking, Japanese fiction does a lot of their own copying, and that is seen as being flattering. Not every culture finds it flattering to copy their mythologies and tropes in the same fashion. And so, because I am somebody who has actually studied Japanese and specifically spent years studying things like Japanese religion, I feel that I have enough cultural knowledge of Japanese religion to do so, to copy things from Japanese religion in a fashion that is respectful of the culture, and that your average Japanese person probably would consider to be respectful. And from the Japanese people who have talked to me about it, thus far, the impressions that I have been given on that have been positive. I would not feel confident doing that for other cultures in the same fashion. I don't have the knowledge base for it. So is there going to be a Bahamut equivalent of some kind? The answer to that is probably yes. Will it literally be called Bahamut? The answer is probably no.
From Telian Solaris, what is the average modern-day person's chance of surviving a judgment?
There are so many variables going into that. Like, does the person or people who are running the judgment know that this is an average modern day person from human Earth isekaiing into this situation? Because that would vastly change how the situation is dealt with. Are isekai protocols active? That would massively change this. So let's just say a person who has vanilla Earth capabilities but no special stuff going on. I would say it depends on their age, it depends on how athletic they are, it depends on whether or not they have hand-to-hand combat experience. Overall, with the average human population, I'm going to say more than 50%, but lower than the average Valiant citizen. And because they have not had the specific preparations that people from that culture are going to have.
From Ghost, how do you as an author, game runner, give the right feel of how dangerous IRA is?
Well, as a game runner, it was easy because I could write the backgrounds for the character, and then I found really, really talented actors to make Ayara absolutely Absolutely terrifying. They were just so good at that. So I can't even take credit for that. Like both of our ARs were phenomenal in different ways, just making her just like absolutely terrifying. As a writer, I've barely scratched the surface of that thus far, but a lot of it is long-term building it up through stories from lots of different characters who you know and trust and respect also being absolutely terrified by this person. And then things like atmospheric elements, like people stumbling upon nursery rhymes about Ayara, or noodle incidents involving Ayara, and Ayara stealing things that go from silly little things like one time Ayara stole an Easter egg to one time Ayara stole the face of a person who claimed to be more beautiful than she was. Those types of things where you kind of gradually escalate from silly AR story to that's actually really goddamn creepy. So yeah, that's kind of the mixture of how I would approach that between those different settings.
From Race Nazar, will you ever tell us all or part of your isekai protocol?
Maybe someday, but I think that it would be a violation of the Isekai protocols to tell you too much about the Isekai protocols.
Also, would someone else who got isekai'd into your world need to be told how to benefit from said protocols?
It depends on how it happens, where, and when, but there are certain things that would happen automatically regardless of who it is.
From L Scholar, have you made or do you have any plans to make a magic system inspired by Trail's orbments given your love of the series?
Sure, I do love trails. I would say that I already have elements of that in the story as it is. But I would say that the one big element that is related to orbments or Final Fantasy materia or things like that is really socketed items of some kind, and I am doing more of that on Dania in specific. I'll probably do that in other continents as well to some degree, but socketed items that you insert orbs or crystals or whatever into, you'll get some of that on Dania.
I'd say, I mean, if you go with using stuff that I was developing for Kester, like that's kind of where I was going with Kester as well, coming up with a mechanical device which could use essence crystals to give people abilities.
Oh yeah, you absolutely can do that on Kaldwin as well, and there's established precedent for it on Kaldwin already. You see things like minor spoilers here, but what's going on with Celise Leanne, for example. There's definitely some like socketed item stuff already going on with Celise Leanne. There's also some of that already talked about in Weapons and Wielders for a possible upgrade path for Dawn. So it's already been touched on Kaldwin, but I would say it's probably going to be more focused in the story, probably in Dania.
From L Scholar, no, sorry, just did that one. From Wandering Linguist, would you ever consider showing readers one of your more detailed book outlines?
Maybe, but only after a series is concluded. I've considered it for some of the ones that I've already finished. I've also considered writing like my thoughts on a series after it's finished, author's notes. But I don't know if and when I might do that.
From Ghostito, do you know where you want the whole overarching story to go, or are you coming up with some things as you go?
Depends on how you define an overarching story. Like I've known for a long time where I'm going to go for something like, the Shades of Ruin, for example. Virtually everything is building up to Shades of Ruin at this point. That's sort of where things are generally going. Individual points along that path, I have varying levels of detail that I've planned them out. It depends. There are certain things I absolutely need to happen, and then there are certain things that are much more flexible.
I'll say that is a common misconception that I've seen a lot in both the Reddit and occasionally on the Discord, that there is a misconception that all of your series are a single storyline built that is like telling one single story to a conclusion, rather than the fact that they're all their own individual stories taking place during a time when events are happening.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say that what my general writing style is much more similar to something like Trails, where you have all of these somewhat interconnected stories, but you can play through Trails in the Sky as a series, and it's its own self-contained story largely. And then, you go play Trails in Cold Steel and say, oh, I know this one character from that series. And yet there might be overarching major villains and things like that, but they're not just telling one main story.
From Ghost, how do you manage 50 players' backstories in a LARP and tie them all to the story?
I don't. A whole plot team does. And with varying degrees of success. Some characters are always, by their nature, going to have less involvement in the main narrative of the story than others. We try our best to try to make sure that every player has something going on that can help, like, tie them into the narrative properly and give them something to do. But sometimes based on the direction of the game itself, or because we don't have time, or because they came up with a concept that doesn't really click, but we allowed it anyway, some characters are going to fit better than others. It's very difficult when you have a lot of characters and also have player agency for everyone to be included to the same degree. I would say even impossible, really. So in a LARP, like, it has to be to some degree more of a open world, make your own experience to some degree. And people are going to get out of it what they put in to some degree. And that means that players who have certain personality types and or players who prep for the game more in terms of talking to game masters and building their backstory are going to have a better experience with it or be more involved. That's not always a sure thing, because you can do a lot of prep and then find out that another character did the same thing and now you have overlap, or that for whatever reason the player base as a whole chooses a route that makes your character's route less valid. So it's tricky, but I think the core answer is we put in as much effort as we can as a team, and we don't get it right. That's the truth of the matter.
I will also say that you can't necessarily tie everyone via plot or backstory to the game, so your next best hope is to tie them in emotionally.
Sure, that's absolutely true too. Get them some sort of emotional investment in what's going on.
Like if there's nothing in their backstory for you to tie them to the overarching plot, see what there is emotionally to give them a reason to care about the plot, and that can sometimes have the same effect.
Yeah, for me, a big part of that is trying to encourage players to have a form of investment in the story through connections with other characters or through factions or that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And how do you make each player feel like a main character?
It's not possible.
Yeah.
I absolutely do what I can to try to do that by looking at the backstories that have been written and trying to say, when I am writing something into a game script that could potentially be tied to a certain character, trying to do it in that fashion. But trying to write personal plot for every character when you've got 50 characters generally is not reasonable. There can be some rotation there for different games where some characters get some in some games and some don't. But mostly what it is being aware of those characters' backstories, and when it is possible, trying to tie them in however I can. And then encouraging them to tie their characters to each other. That makes it infinitely easier. Having characters build characters that are, say, these characters are part of the S's faction. They are inherently going to get built into plot that involves the S's, or House Haven, or that sort of thing. And that makes it infinitely easier for them to be invested in the game.
As being a player and a game runner, I'd say that on the player's side, the players need to grab story and make it their own. If as a player, you can't expect the plot team to devote time to you.
Well, there are two different types of players, right? There are reactive players and there are active players. And I don't think that one of them is necessarily the right way to play, but I will say that active characters are in many ways easier to write story for. But I do believe that it is possible to be a reactive player and to still have fun at LARP. The problem comes in when you are a reactive player, but you expect to be treated like an active player. And some people do that and they don't have a good time.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm saying is as a player, it needs to be on you to make the story your own. You are being a character in the world, so be in the world.
Yeah, even if you don't have the energy to go ahead and like chase down plot threads or anything, you have to find a way to tie your own character to the story. You have to find a way to get your own enjoyment out of the story that is being told to you. Like it's a give and take experience.
Like Kester in the Arcane Ascension LARP, I didn't go out and seek things. I think 80% of my game time was doing paperwork, basically, but I was a part of the world. I was affecting things even while doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, no, it is a huge issue of being a game runner and trying to make sure that everyone is having fun and everyone is feeling like they're a part of something. But I've been on both sides of that curtain, and there really is a lot of weight on the player to be involved. And as long as they're being involved, they're going to become part of the main story.
Yeah.
It's when players are passive, they don't want to talk to the other players. They don't want to be a part of other players' events that are going on. That's when you end up with people that just end up just sitting around and not having a whole lot of fun. And it's really hard. And even if you go to them, sometimes it's hard to get those players to come with you and trying to get them tied into stories, even if you devote time to them.
Yes.
Sometimes there's just players that you're not going to reach.
Yeah.
I also want to say that it's important to foster a community that encourages veterans to help out new players, and it also encourages players to trust one another and share with one another, because it is very, very easy for LARPs to get into cliquishness or situations where people are hoarding the plot and keeping secrets, and then you end up with games with have 50 players where 6 of those players know what the main plot is because they have discovered the big evil secret and are not willing to share it with everyone else.
Yeah,
100%. I didn't even like mention that, but yeah, like that. The other side of that is the rest of the players that are, as Reika termed them, the active players. They also need to be open to drawing in players who want to get involved with what they're doing.
All right, that's probably enough on that LARP question. Do we have any more quick ones to finish things up, and then we'll call it for the night in a few minutes?
Let me just do real quick here. There is not too many left, like maybe 10 questions. From Ghostito, if a cat or dog got enough of the other essence, would you end up with cat dog?
Theoretically, if they chose to use their essence in that fashion and reached a high enough level, they could become a cat dog. It is possible.
From L Scholar, which character that you have written would you most want to train under?
Definitely not the Smiling Sword Saint. Let's see. Train under. That's an interesting one for me, because as a somebody who has both martial interests and interests outside of combat, from a sword training standpoint, I think our God of Swords is probably still the best answer for that. Although his first apprentice would also be very interesting to train under. But aside from that, In terms of my actual general skill set that I use in the real world, I would probably want to train under somebody like Eric Terran, and learn better, god tier writing abilities. That would be useful.
That tracks.
If you had a large enough press to squeeze them in to get any information.
That's fair. My characters are kind of terrible about that. But if I'm ostensibly training under that person, I would hope that that means that I'm getting some useful information out of it.
That's fair. From Mountain King, if an animal licked enough nodes like a lollipop instead of eating them, could they open their breath point first instead of their heart point?
That's really not how that would play out. But funny question. Good try.
From Duke, for Reka, would you be interested in taking a judgment by our certified voice of the tower ghost?
Sure, I'm down for a challenge.
From Technical, since Corin and his team defeated a child of the tyrant, are they owed or can they ask for a visage boon?
Really good question. That type of thing will come up in AA5. I'm not sure if it will be phrased in that fashion, but that will come up in some fashion.
From Orthus, which of your point of view characters do you think would make the best use of the chance to ask you a question?
Valian.
I was going to say Valian. I was about to be like, I know my answer.
Yeah. Well, at least we're on the same page on that. If not,
Hold on a
my
second.
characters you trust.
Hold on a second. Valian is a point of view character?
Eventually.
Okay.
I have written Valian's point of view already, so I would count Valian.
Okay. Stagnant Flux asks, are there isekai protocols built into judgments?
Not judgments specifically.
From Sterling, in Liadrin, do oranges and the color orange share the same word?
I have no idea.
From Extradition, how does one steal the concept of the letter S?
You're going to have to ask AR about that. Good luck.
From Storyteller, how can one start LARPing without experience beforehand?
I would recommend looking online for a safe local community with a good reputation, and then contacting their staff to ask the best way to get involved. But definitely do some reading because, without going into too much detail, some LARP communities are sketchier than others. And I would also advise that, especially if you are a young person or assigned female at birth, you bring friends. Seriously.
Well, as someone who started LARPing as a young person assigned female at birth, I will just say that is absolutely true. I don't want to give the impression that LARP communities are any more or less safe than any other community. Like, how would you go to a convention for the first time? It's the same basic principle. I do recommend bringing friends, and I do just recommend remembering that, like anything else, you would be coming into a new community, and it can be super easy to make friends, but if you decide that it's not for you, there are other LARPs out there. So,
absolutely true. LARPs are not a ubiquitous thing. Like, there are tons of different LARPs out of there that have different cultures, different styles. It's just like any hobby. There are going to be vastly different mindsets depending on the specific LARP.
Absolutely. But what Andrew said about reaching out to the game runners and asking specific questions is a very good tip.
I do not have any good advice for this one. I was dragged unknowingly to one.
I mean, so was I, actually.
I guess I was involved in both of your first LARPs, yeah? Because I dragged Reka to LARP, and then in Castor's case, I think I ran the first LARP you participated in, yeah?
Miniver's Mansion. So it was the joint one.
Castor, was it Miniver's Mansion or was it RenQuest?
Okay. If you want to consider like a convention like line dungeon thing, then it was like the RenQuest thing.
I mean, yeah, I wanted to be your first LARP experience, and
That's
that went
fine.
through.
Okay, that's fair.
I win.
All right, and that is the end of the questions.
All right. Well, thank you all for attending. Thanks again to the moderators for setting this up and enabling this. Thank you especially to Castor for doing most of the heavy lifting for the Q&A, and for Elfie as well for giving us our amazing intro. And Reika, thank you for showing up and being my co-writer here to go over the questions with. I appreciate all of you. Thanks to all of my readers here who are listening, and I hope that you love the book if and when you decide to read it. I will be creepily stalking all of the live blogging that you guys do tonight, so please look forward to that. And again, if you enjoy the book, please leave a review. They're very important to me. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, and that is the end of the Edge of the Woods Q&A.